ICANN, a longtime supporter of the summit, and they're setting up a booth over there. And you'll hear from them later this afternoon about their new GTLD program. I'll let them explain it later, but because it gets a little deep. Aaron, the American Registry for Internet Numbers, they're a longtime sponsor as well. The folks at CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, my former organization, great group, the .ca people, register.ca. TELUS are sponsoring the 2 receptions we have this year. So we have a reception after the event closes today, and then another one tomorrow, and TELUS has come on board to sponsor both of those. And finally, the Internet Society, Natalie's here. There are a few other people, Sebastian from the Internet Society, great organization. I also used to work there. But the Internet Society is actually where the summit started, and is transitioning to the ICI, and eventually, well, you'll hear more about it tomorrow, but will truly be Indigenous led very soon. And then I really have to shout out, not them. I have to shout out the 2 big supporters of the ICI itself, TD Bank. TD Bank supports all of our workforce development work, and they've been a great partner for us. And also the MasterCard Foundation, who saw what we were trying to do 3 years ago and have given us the money to do what we're doing here. So if you can, support these organizations, but that's all I needed to say. And I'm looking for Fred. I don't see Fred. Oh, there's Fred. Cool. So thank you.
Oh, I was wondering what the noise was over in the corner over there. Or something was scary. Oh, yeah. Woke up everybody. I'm not sure what's happening. I think they were trying to put up some kind of media screen, etc. But yeah, I think it woke us up. And Mark had mentioned some of these sponsors, and we definitely appreciate the sponsors. And I think for the sponsors to be out here, you take that chance. But it's interesting because of like when we hear some of our presentations yesterday for some of those businesses that decided to team up, like what Lyle was mentioning with telco and stuff. You go into some very interesting areas and places that you haven't gone before. And you get some, this is where you start a lot of the innovations. And this is where you get some really good firsthand experiences, and you have that, you become that resource person because you're thinking they're going outside the box. And this is one of the things when we get together like this, for especially like at ICI. And today I see some new faces in the audience. There's a new table over here. There's I haven't seen them. I didn't see them yesterday. They're all smiling, but they're not sure. But I'm gonna pick on them over there because I picked on everybody else. The youth are them. They're used to being picked on in the various organizations. I think this is some of the realities that yesterday. What was interesting for those, as a recap, really quick. What was interesting yesterday, and I think I definitely appreciated when we started off yesterday. We had individuals like Sherry McCuller with the Rapid Links Telecommunication. I was talking to one of her colleagues came up to me yesterday. I think it was Shiraz. And we were talking, and Shiraz had mentioned, he says, I'd like to hear what the youth have to say in terms of being part of this ICI conference, in terms of what are they observing or what are they seeing. And I was telling him, talk to the organizers. And I think this is something that will happen, like a Q&A as well. There should be Q&As after some of these presentations. Yesterday it went a little longer than usual, but the reason why it went a little longer is because the discussions were starting, and it's one of the things that I observed. Every one of you were switching tables, and you were starting to feel comfortable with each other and starting to get a different insight from the technical people to the policy people to the government people and to the private sector and from the Indigenous. This is where everybody's in their little boxes, but you come out, and this is where you find you get that ease. And it's important. And I think when we started off yesterday, this is some of the backgrounds, and I was seeing what I really appreciated yesterday is looking at it was like when Sherry came up. Sherry was, she's over there, and when I first met Sherry, very interesting person. But when I saw the presentation, being from North Carolina, and also working on both sides of the border and helping communities, she is very humble in the sense that the work that she does and how she does it, and she came across very straightforward. Wasn't inundated in terms of what she presented, but it was a lot, and it was sort of like a roadmap as to how things are done. And what I noticed was it was terms of like finance, and I kind of got the feeling that almost sounds like a banker or maybe finance. I have a son that's just gone on to finance and is on one of those things on Bay Street, and since he's been with the organization, he has that kind of talk and speak. But when he does presentations, it's basically the same thing. And I think Shiraz mentioned that, a colleague to Sherry, that, yeah, she does have that kind of financial economic background. But what was interesting is what she outlined was those nuances across, those pitfalls, those gaps, things to watch out for, like a right-of-way. Instead of making it narrow, make it wide, that if you're going to pass a line, if you get a huge boulder, you don't have to extend the right-of-way. You just you have that leeway because you negotiated it up front about how to deal with contractors. So what she did is she gave a little bit of everything for everybody that you can catch, and I could even catch it, and that's the interesting, that's what I really, really appreciated. And this is the kind of stuff for a lot of communities that we need and require. And going down the list, when we saw everybody, like when we heard Telesat, the good, the bad, and the ugly with Leo's, and then when we saw Lyle with Teclo, and when we saw, as well as what's happening with Joaquin in South America, I saw the North, and I also saw the jungle. And how the inequity was challenged by First Nation individuals, but also partnering with, like, for example, at Teclo with Norenco. They stepped out of their comfort zone, and it just happened to be someone like Lyle to be able to come up with a plan and saying, yeah, we definitely need that kind of, we need connectivity. And the same with Joaquin. What I appreciated is in the picture is seeing an individual rappelling a jungle tree to put a receiver on top, instead of putting a steel tower, putting up a tree, rappelling up a tree and putting it up there. Something that's, how do you say, eco-friendly, etc. So those are some of the things, and I got a laugh. It reminded me of things was when they had APTN, when they first came online. I didn't have, I had satellite. I couldn't get cable or anything because a little far of it, I got a satellite. And of all things that were available was Bell. And Bell told me, you can have satellite, but you're going to have to cut a lot of trees so you get a scope, because you got a lot of trees in your area around your house. And I looked at him and I says, I can't cut the trees because it's the shade. I don't have air conditioning. I don't need air conditioning. But I was careful in what I did with the trees. And he gave me a scope. He says, it's got to be this many degrees to get the satellite. And I asked him where. He says, right there. He says, you see that big poplar tree right there? He says, yeah. He says, it's going to have to pass that giant oak tree over there. I says, okay. He says, you're going to have to cut this one down and that one down. I says, okay. So he says, let me know what you decide. He says, I'll come and install it. He says, I'm going to go to the vehicle and stuff. Well, I told him, well, install it on the poplar tree. He looked at me and I looked at the thing over there. I says, will it pass? He goes, yeah. I says, what's it going to cost me? He says, it'll just cost you a cable. It's pretty cheap. So I got like 75 feet of cable running from my poplar tree to over there in order to get cable. Well, you wouldn't, lo and behold, I think the president at the time beginning president was Paul LaRose. I think he's still there at APTN. Well, wouldn't you know it, his wife came to visit our community, and he came to the cultural center with his wife, and I happened to go there. And he says, hey, I'd like to get a tour of the res. And his wife says, well, I got stuff to do here, you know. So I said, I'll do it. So I took him on a tour of our community. And he says, every community that I go to with my wife, or if I go, he says, I try to get a look of the community. And he says, okay, I'll take you around. He says, let's see where you stay. He says, you have, what do you have for a reception? He says, I got Bell. So anyways, I take a ride by my house, looks around, I invite him in, and he says, yeah. And the first thing he saw was that satellite dish stuck to the poplar tree. He started laughing. He says, I got to get a picture. He says, only on the res where you see a satellite dish stuck to a tree. I says, well, I was thinking of putting an outhouse there, but I says, the tree will do, you know. So these are some of the things that we see, and these are things that from an Indigenous perspective. Gerald, you're out there? Come on up here, Gerald. Come on up, Gerald. Gerald? Okay. We're going to start clapping if you don't come up. So, come on, Gerald. Either that. Gerald? Either that or I'm going to bring a cordless mic to you. Okay, I'm going to bring the cordless mic to you. Well, we're going to get on standby here. We're going to get Gerald, but for our next day here, we're going to get the Mohawk Networks, Jason Hall. Jason, wherever you are, just stand by, but we're going to get Gerald, okay? But come on up. Come on up. Have a seat there. Gerald, I'm going to bring the mic to you. One, two. Since we all have, one of the things here is we deal with technology, and from an Indigenous perspective, we have to have a sense of humor, because some of the things that we deal with in our communities, and sometimes we see these crazy things that, but we get around them. And this is one of the things, and I'm gonna get Gerald to tell this one. He's just using whatever, but it's no disrespect, but it shows some of the challenges. I'll mention, Gerald's going to tell his and I'll tell mine, and then we're going to go into the Mohawk technology. So he has a really quick joke.
Good morning, everyone. I was just kind of messing around with them this morning, so I wasn't expecting to tell the joke, so just bear with me. And I guess it's not really a joke, it's more of an experience. And I'm sure some of us have experienced it in the past. So this would have been a couple of years ago. The Prime Minister went and visited our community, and he was doing a tour and meeting some of the elders, checking out some of the spots. And he said, well, what are 3 challenges that your community is facing right now? So the chief was with him, and he said, first challenge we're facing is we don't have running water. So he made a call on his cell phone, and he called the minister, one of the ministers, and they said, we need to get this community a water treatment plant as soon as possible. And he said, I approve the funding for it. And he said, okay. And then Prime Minister asked, okay, well, what's the second issue you guys are having? He said, we have a housing crisis in our community. We have multiple generations of families living in one household. So he made another call and he said, we need to start this housing project where we can get their people trained to build houses. And we need to get 50 houses brought out to this community as soon as possible. And they said, okay. And he had his whole team with him, you know, like full entourage, media, and all that jazz. So then he asked the chief, well, what's the third issue you guys are having? And he said, well, we don't have cell service out here.
Audience, a delayed response. I think, Gerald, I think it's a little too early, right? No, but this is, and I'll give you and this is for real too. This is one here where we had, anybody know Belinda Stronach? Okay, Belinda Stronach, you know, Frank Stronach, her dad, he does Magna International, makes car parts, and she was up on the hill one of the times. Anyways, there was a literacy campaign. It was a literacy, and she decided, he says, I'm going to go visit the Algonquin communities, which is one of mine. And she had heard, and she says, I want to assist in literacy. So the handlers come up and they ask, you know, we're going to come to your community, maybe one of yours and some of the others we're going to visit. So, and she wants to make a presentation and she wants to make a donation. And he says, okay, so we prepare and everything and, you know, get all the people coming in. And one of the things, she comes down and she makes the announcement and she says, and I will provide 40 laptops to this community. She says, I've seen all the communities and I've seen all. And it's just this one particular community is about 3 hours north of my community. And she goes, and to assist in their education, we are donating these 40 laptops. So a representative from that community was there, and she was, you know, they're feeling good and everything. And that one hand from that one community raised the hand and says, yeah, half of us don't have internet. You should have seen the handlers. The handlers scrambled and everything, and you know, and all the Indians were laughing. None of the others were not laughing. So these are some of the realities that still exist. But what we got here yesterday, and we started is we see what partnerships, joint ventures, financing, and what is the initiative from communities and partners has done. And this is the interesting part. Like, it's outside of the box. It's really outside of the box. And for those of you that are first attending, and for today, and for those it's your first time at ICI, this is the kind of stuff that goes on within these ICI meetings that don't discuss, or you don't hear, or you never looked at it like that. So this is the nice part. So with this, we're going to go here with Mohawk Technologies, our Mohawk Networks. Jason Hall, I think here. Yeah, he's getting. He says 1 minute there. He's priming himself there. Oh no, he's doing the technical stuff. He's getting connected. So yeah, so these are. It's a little inundating for the amount of stuff that you get that you find here, but I'm starting to feel more comfortable with the technical aspect, the finance aspect, and a lot of the things in between, how communities have done it, and seeing the big one. Yes. Okay. While we wait. Okay. While we wait there for Jason. Yeah, Jason's getting okay. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna run over here. I gotta hear this one.
So the communities on the James Bay coast don't have cellular. Like Fort Albany and Sheshwan does not have cellular. And in 2010, I went into Attawapskat to deploy a cellular network. I managed that project. And a few years later, well, the perimeter of the reach was only about 17 kilometers. So a few years later, I was talking to a friend of mine. His name is Andrew Kustachin, and he runs the community sportsplex in Attawapskat. There's an island just east of Attawapskat called Akimiski Island. And that's where some of the families go and they have their hunt camps. So Andrew has a family. He has 7 kids. And I always tease him about how his family is actually a baseball team. And because there's 9 players. But anyway, he went out to the camp. And when Fred was talking about the tree idea, that sparked this memory in me. So one night, Andrew was at his camp and he heard voices. He heard someone talking. And he went around, he couldn't figure out where this noise was coming from. And it was his son up a tree talking to his girlfriend in Attawapskat, like about, I don't know, 17 kilometers away. So, you know, the internet is marvelous and connectivity is marvelous for those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, and you could see individuals that go to reserve communities and stuff. You could tell which ones are from really serious urban areas. You know how? How we can tell is when they go to the schools or certain areas. These are the non-Indigenous people that have their cell phone and they're walking around. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get reception. And you can tell this is one of the interesting things, etc. So these are the realities. And I think Jason is going to give us some background. And I don't know if you'd like to use a podium or if you'd like to use the.
Use a podium.
You're going to use the podium? Okay, he's a podium kind of guy. Not really.
Good morning. My name's Jason Hall. Coming here to share Mohawk Networks story. We are a tribally owned broadband service provider. We operate on St. Regis Mohawk tribe, which is part of the Mohawks of Akwesasne. As you can see here, we reside on, I don't know if it's obvious, but we reside on both sides of the border, the Canadian and US portion. We're also in Ontario and Quebec, so, you know, that provides some interesting jurisdictional issues. So just to show you an example of you know, what one tribe has done to provide broadband for, you know, our people and members. So Mohawk Networks operates mainly on, or strictly on the, I shouldn't say strictly, but mainly on the US portion of our reserve. This is due to when it was built, our funding was from external sources and they're all from US, you know, grants and awards and stuff like that. So about 2009 is when we started our broadband initiative. St. Regis Mohawk tribe. Nice. So got 2 clickers here. So so yeah, started in 2009. We received 2 awards, one for our infrastructure and one for the digital skills and literacy aspect of bringing broadband to a reserve. So in 2010, so we received a $10.5 million award from the Broadband Infrastructure Program. You know, this represents not the total funding needed to actually build the network. So this was there was a big commitment from the tribe as well to, you know, build this infrastructure. So we also have a Broadband Technology Opportunities Program Award. So this was for the digital skills and literacy aspect of the broadband initiative. Our project, we initially built 68 miles of fiber. So on territory, we went from dial-up, like T1 lines, to fiber to the home. So it was, it was a good project. We also, during this time, so I was hired as one of the project managers during the initial project phase, and I worked, my main duties were building 5 public computer centers, managing the digital literacy, and then, but I worked alongside the project teams that also did all the fiber and that stuff. So I've been involved with the broadband aspects of our tribe since 2011. I came in 2011. So 2013, we established our own central office. So we own and operate our own network. We have tribal members. Like our entire staff is I shouldn't say entire. Like 90% of our staff is tribal members that work and operate and run and maintain the fiber network. Part of the BTOP grant, I included I had this idea, like we had contingency funds that needed to be spent. So I said, well, let me get some video equipment and maybe stream local events or sports events or something to that aspect, and get some summer students and work towards providing live events and streaming throughout our community. So that started a ball rolling, and then eventually we got we actually met with somebody from your territory, Regan Jacobs. So she came down and helped us, develop this idea, and then it ended up turning into Akwesasne TV, which is like end up being like Indigenous storytelling from our point of view, and so it was a great thing that came out of the BTOP was to see that develop out of it, and now we have producers and content providers born out of that idea. So we eventually took the Akwesasne TV and made it part of our fiber network offering. So we do video through the fiber to the homes, and we included Akwesasne TV as one of the channels to our local residents. 2013, that's when the fiber home installs began. So I say we have 80% of eligible people, homes passed as subscribers. The other 20% that will probably either don't want it or it's a affordability issue. So most of that was from word of mouth, meeting with the community, getting signups, during that phase, and then going to the homes and installing. 2014, we completed the build and we started our operations. So initially we were an open access network model. We finished the fiber build. We invited people to come operate, and nobody came. So, it's still like, so internet was like redlined around our territory from the American side. It's not that they couldn't build it there. It's just that they made decisions not to come on our territory, right? So that continued even after our fiber was up and operational. So we had one local carrier that was doing fixed wireless. So we invited them to operate on the fiber network as a provider. And we also had one external provider, third party from different state who wanted to be, offer the services and run the billing and all that aspect and everything. So we did that in 2014. I think after about a year or two, we realized that that model is not going to work. So that's when, the tribe decided to start running and operating it themselves. So let's see. So 2015, we actually transitioned to instead of being a broadband department under the tribal government structure, we actually became a broadband department under the LLC structure, the for-profit Duatahuni Corporation, which is the Section 17 holding company for the tribe's business holdings. So casinos under that structure, and we're under that structure, and a construction company and something else. So this is to manage their for-profit entities. Also 2015, that's when Akwesasne TV started broadcasting on a local channel. So this was like the end of the project phase. We completed the build. We have homes installed. We're starting operations. We're hiring lots of people, developing our own people in these new broadband careers. So 2016, we're in business. 2017, we actually built a tower, and we started because we had to move our services and expand off our territory, to be sustainable. So because when you're operating on territory, you only have limited numbers of homes you passed and potential subscribers. So I think we are like capped out, in order for us to sustain operations, we need to expand our subscriber base. So we decided to move or establish a North Country broadband, which was for off-territory sales. So what we would do is from our fiber network, we go through a middle mile partner and get to, I think we went like 2 hours south of us to a county that needed help as well with internet. So we do like a fiber to towers and do like a fixed wireless solution to customers 2 hours away. We also do like fixed wireless customers on surrounding our territory that are not necessarily on native land. So we do offer fixed wireless solutions and fiber. 2017, our tribe started speaking on congressional testimony on challenges that we've seen and faced and other tribes are facing. About this time, the cost of running broadband is substantial. So we started shared services to reduce some of these operational costs. And what that means is so we have a casino on territory that has 24/7 operations. So we started shared services with them to do like, we use some of their IT services, we use HR services, we use financial and accounting services with them. So this allows us to reduce our staff, lower our burden and on personnel, and it also brings money back into another organization, tribal organization entity. So it worked out for both of us. So because they're 24/7, like we can use their help desk, IT help desk, for our after-hour support and stuff like that. So this is ways we came up with to manage some of our challenges and to work through those and make it work for us. 2019, we saw a major issue with all of our CPE equipment, GPON issues. So we had to replace 70% of our ONTs, which was approximately 800-900 ONTs. So that was a a big hit to our operations. So I mean, it's stuff that's unknown at the time, but as you're working and operating, you may run into some of these issues, after a couple of years. So 2020, COVID, 2019 COVID, household disaster relief. So we paid, we had the 6 months of paid internet for all of our territory. So, they didn't have to think about the bills for a little while. We retained 100% of our employees during this time, which was, this is about the time where broadband services became from a luxury to almost a necessity, right? So we saw the change, and we saw the demand on the network spike up too. So during this time. Because we saw that increase, we had to actually replace our whole core network to meet these demands and growth. So at that time, we rebuilt our whole core and fortified our network to meet those demands of our new environment and world, I guess. Because we have limited number of homes we pass, and we need to figure out ways to be sustainable. So we also received a certification in it's called 8A certification. So what that does is allow us to work in federal contracting space in the United States and apply for contracts with the government and stuff, and run them through our entity. It's given us other avenues for revenue to be sustainable. Also, part of that initiative is like a hub zone certification, which is more for the U.S., but it's not really a thing in the Canadian side. But I'm sure they have similar structures over here. Federal contract and development. So our first sole source award awarded in 2022, which was, I guess it's pretty quick for operating in that space. We do some advocacy, and our general manager, Allison Mitchell, sits on various federal boards and stuff like that. And so National Communications Task Force, Native American Contractors Association, and she's involved in various aspects throughout Indian country and tribal broadband. In 2023, we received a TBCP grant award. So this was, we applied for 9 million, we got 500,000. So big difference, right? So you can't really do the same thing you planned in an original application, with they call it equitable distribution amount. So that was call it something else. What we did with this amount was, I'm actually closing that award this month. On our tower, we added equipment for private LTE connections and take advantage of the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum that we were awarded, and to overlay our area with we have fiber on our territory. Also, overlaid it with some fixed wireless, and then only thing I'm not doing yet is the mobility part. So with cell service and that, so that's a whole nother adventure. So we didn't get to that aspect yet, but really we're overlaying our territory with multiple solutions and trying to get a total broadband solution in place. Also along this time, 2023, we hosted a tribal broadband boot camp. So, that we had other tribes come to our territory and then work with an external organization to learn about broadband, tribal broadband awareness, the aspects of creating network and operations on your territory. So multiple tribes come to attend these boot camps. It's really a powerful resource throughout our territory, and open to all tribes. They hold various boot camps throughout the year, so you should look into that if you're interested in learning more about broadband. So we started a joint venture with our federal contracting with another company out in Indianapolis. So that was established in 2023 as well. We also had multiple awards that were not, or multiple applications that were not awarded to us, and that was with the Reconnect program. And so a lot of that was due to mapping and issues beyond our control around our territory. So their definition of tribal land and our definition were different, and this affected the scoring of the application. And so this is something that like Mohawk Networks itself couldn't resolve, but it'd have to be like a nation to nation to nation type thing where we lobby with the USDA to get that restructured, or the FCC, whoever is defining our territory and what it looks like, and how that affects scoring on our applications. So we're always looking for external funding and sources to supplement our operations and to help us be sustainable. 2024, we're also doing a lot of digital inclusion and workforce development. So we established these tribal broadband careers. We have people in place. Most of our employees been there for years. We need to develop more people to replace the current people. So that's something that's in always on our minds and in development, and it's one of our initiatives for our operations in Mohawk Networks. Advocacy, we participate in various events like this, right? So we want to be part of tribal broadband solutions, tribal broadband awareness, and we can't do that sitting at home. So we join in the conversation when we can, where we can. So I started with a blank area. So this is our fiber network now, and you can see the purple represents all our fiber connections on territory. And we're currently, our territory's got some land back, so that image is going to change. And so is our service area. So we're going to be expanding this, and then we're working with local partners, local counties, and their projects to develop a resilient network operations center. We're going to be building another network operations building. We're going to be expanding some of the fiber between the buildings, creating resilient paths for this stuff, and just making our network stronger. And we're also going from, because we've been operating since 2009, we're going from our GPON technology to XGS-PON. So we'll be offering 10 gigabit symmetrical to the premise. So that's coming this year. So I actually just purchased the equipment for that. So I'm just going to be installing that stuff soon. And then we'll be beginning those operations and making that available to our customers. Some of our employees. So we also have like a structured cabling and structured cabling, surveillance and security, and other services on territory. And a lot of this stuff is farmed out to companies off territory. So we brought some of that stuff back on territory, and we offer these services for our local infrastructure, our local governments, our local businesses. You see here's a image of our operations center, and then image of our field operations manager, Colby, doing the work. And we're not a huge team, but but we do what we can with what we have. So as most people do, you see a lot of these people in this picture have 2 or 3 job titles. That's it. So that's our story. I mean, if you want to learn more, just come see me. Just showing you an example of what one tribe did and to build broadband and bring it to their people. Okay. Thank you.
This one here, Jason. Yeah, Jason. Now and Dongjimigwech. That's Jason Hall with Mohawk Networks. Jason, it's like you got more fiber than I have. The only fiber I get is in my cereal. My community doesn't have any of that kind of fiber yet, or it's starting. But I think it's interesting how it starts, and what I appreciate is like Teklo and stuff is, and like with Joaquin, is when you started, and then when you show the last map of the connectivity, et cetera, and it goes around around the territory, that's considerable. That's just within your territory, and like Teklo and others, it's like across tundra and across areas. So it shows the capability, and like you said, but with the staff that you do it with, that's the real challenge. And I think for everyone here that's not familiar, just as a reminder, is that Akwesasne, nobody ever asked what the border was. Nobody ever asked what the boundaries will be for Canada and U.S. They just arbitrarily did it. And it's 2 countries, 1 state, 2 provinces. And when things break out, it's not Akwesasne's fault. It's the both governments, because they never asked. And then when they challenge the barriers. These are the barriers that they have to go through. For anyone that goes to a powwow, you know what a hoop dancer is? Raise your hands if you know what a hoop dancer or seen a hoop dance. Okay. Well, there's not too many. There's a lot. For our general members here of non-powwow, is a hoop dance is they're started when they're small, and the hoops tell a story. And one of the things is a really good hoop dancer. There's a hoop dance competition every year in New Mexico, I think, or Arizona, and some of them do up to 20 hoops, and they're all in motion. Oh, this is what it looks like. I think what Jason has described, and everybody else that has done with systems, is you're the hoop dancer. The stuff that you do and how you do it, and you come through and you tell the story, and this is what the hoop dance, and this is some of the hoop dances you see up on the presentations here. So with that, we're gonna what's important too is we have our youth over here, and I think this is things that you're going to deal with, and this is another presentation here. It's the mentorship. Mentorship is very important, and in our audience here, we have a lot of you that you probably have done that, and you've mentored a lot within your organizations. Now you're looking for something a little different, and you're here at this meeting. And you have that kind of experience, and you have that potential as well as to assist. So with that, we'll get Sarah Jacknife. Sarah, she's coming up here. Sarah.
Tanse, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm going to be presenting today on some research that I actually did for the Indigenous Connectivity Institute on the role of Indigenous mentorship. So the Indigenous Connectivity Institute is developing a workforce strategy to increase the number of Indigenous folks in like network, broadband, IT. And so me and my team were hired to look at what would a mentorship program to accompany this workforce strategy look like. So we've spent the last few months really diving deep into what is Indigenous mentorship, what are some wise practices, and what would a program look like that kind of works for the work that Indigenous Connectivity Institute does. The nice thing about this report, it should be published before the holidays. It will be a public report, so anything that we put in here, you can access at that time, and it will be on Indigenous Connectivity Institution's website. Yes, exactly. I just did want to acknowledge that I'll get a little bit more into my introduction shortly, but really grateful to be on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin Nation. And yeah, really grateful I've spent some time on the water, and water as an Indigenous person, I grew up on a lake, is really important to me. So it's really nice to spend some time here. Like I mentioned, my name is Sarah. So I was born and raised in Elizabeth Métis Settlement, which is in northern Alberta. So there's 8 Métis settlements in Alberta, and I grew up in one, which I'm very grateful for. And my grandma was from Saddle Lake, so I've got Korean Métis ancestry on my dad's side and mixed European ancestry on my mom's side. But I currently reside as a guest in Calgary. I'm the founder and managing director of Jacknife Consulting. Oh, sorry, I gotta get used to this. I'm founding and managing director of Jacknife Consulting. So we're an Indigenous consulting firm that specializes in Indigenous research, policy development, as well as organizational learning. And so we work with organizations across Canada to do things like research or design Indigenous policies for them. What we'll be learning about today is going over me and my team's kind of approach to this research project. So how we approached it, what the current state of mentorship is. We'll also be going over our findings from our research, and then we'll be talking briefly about our recommendations that we're putting forward for the Indigenous Connectivity Institute. So for this research project, what me and my team did is we did a mixed method approach. So we conducted virtual interviews with 4 women and 4 men that were recruited based on their experience with Indigenous mentorship programs. The majority were Indigenous. We had 1 non-Indigenous participant, but they had extensive experience working in reserves in Alberta designing mentorship programs. The majority of them were tech founders, CEOs, or ran Indigenous mentorship programs. And it was really important for us to have gender representation. So we're really grateful that we were able to get that. We still have 1 more interview that had to be rescheduled, but most of the interviews are complete. And then we also did an environmentalist scan. So we looked at mentorship programs broadly across Canada. And then we really focused as well on Indigenous mentorship programs that targeted youth. So we kind of did quite a deep dive into what's happening across the country. What are some results that are coming up in themes? Me and my team also do all of our research through an Indigenous gender-based analysis lens. So really looking at what is the role of gender and sexuality and how do those intersect in findings that we have. So you'll hear that a lot throughout the research is some of the gaps that we were also identifying. So what is Indigenous mentorship? One of the things that we found is that, and many of us who are Indigenous probably know this, is that Indigenous people have been mentoring since time immemorial. The term mentorship isn't necessarily a term that maybe an Indigenous elder would use, or even Indigenous folks themselves, but they do kind of naturally do mentorship. Examples of this, so this was a quote from one of the elders that we interviewed for this project, where he talks about Indigenous mentorship being a family model of learning. And so if we think about, how Indigenous people would have went through like rites of passage or ceremony when they went from like a young person to adult, that is a form of mentorship. The other forms of Indigenous mentorship traditionally would be potentially someone showing an interest in a certain area and an elder, an older person mentoring them and sharing that knowledge. Mentorship within Indigenous context tends to be reciprocal, so one person isn't seen as more valued or the other. It's also community orientated, so a family or community coming together to support that young person over an extended period of time. So I really love this quote from the elder because I think it really touches on all those different pieces. So in terms of what mentorship programs are out there, so there's several different types of approaches to mentorship. The most common one, which we're all probably quite familiar with, is one-on-one mentorship, so where there's a mentor and a mentee. And this type of mentorship model is really great because it builds really deep relationships, and it can actually be particularly effective for girls. It is really good at kind of having that really specialized knowledge transferred. One of the barriers of this is that it can be really intimidating for some participants to do this style of mentorship. And it can also require that you have the same amount of mentors for mentees, which can be a barrier if you're in rural areas or if you're looking for really specific knowledge. There might not be that many people who have that type of knowledge. The other one is group mentorship. So this type of mentorship is when there's multiple mentors and mentees who participate. It really encourages collaboration, peer learning. This type of mentorship works really well in rural communities where adult mentors might not be as common. And it also has research, there's a lot of research on the benefits of group mentoring as well, particularly for girls and women. However, the challenge with this type of mentorship program is it can kind of lack that intimacy that you might get or that catered knowledge with the one-on-one. And finally, there's peer-to-peer. So this is often when youth mentor someone else who's younger or like both at the same kind of level in their career. The benefits of this, it can feel an inclusive space. It can feel really welcoming. You can build a lot of supportive networks, but it's very limited in terms of, career advancement, learning something that maybe like if you wanted to like advance in your career or take a really specific direction, you might be limited in that. One of the most popular programs that we heard quite frequently throughout our research is called the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program, and it's offered in over 50 Indigenous communities across Canada. And so they have a peer-to-peer network program where high school students mentor Indigenous youth, so elementary, and they often incorporate things like elders and traditional knowledge keepers. So that program has been running for a number of years and is quite successful. Finally, there's informal and then formal mentorship programs. So informal mentorship programs, we've probably all participated in that when maybe you start a new job and you start talking to someone and like, oh yeah, let's grab coffee. And then all of a sudden you're grabbing coffee, every few weeks to catch up. It tends to be more informal, less hierarchical, less structured. Research suggests Indigenous people tend to be more drawn towards these types of programs, where a formal mentorship program would have like a start date, an end date, structured programs, and there's really clear kind of outcomes attached to that. So through our research, we kind of found a few findings. One of the ones that came up was really the importance when you're designing an Indigenous mentorship program is really centering space for relationship building. So one of the things that I was actually really surprised was that all of our participants that we interviewed were former mentors or had mentored in a way, and they all talked about the importance of like telling Indigenous mentees, I'm not right for you, but this person is. And so that ability at the beginning for mentors and mentees to kind of pair up naturally based on what their interests are versus forcing a relationship that doesn't make sense. And so this makes sure that mentors and mentees are matched based on what their common goals are. And so ways that this was suggested was at the beginning, having time for a meal, something like this, like a conference, and allowing a relationship building to kind of happen organically. And so that kind of matching kind of happens from participants themselves, not you telling them who they need to go with. The second one that came up was around cultural integration. So all of the participants and research suggests that culture is really important in a mentorship program, but culture is nuanced. So it needs to be driven by community themselves. And so mentors and mentees need to decide what does culture look like for them in a program. So one of the participants that we interviewed runs mentorship programs in Alberta in reserves, and they mentioned that for communities, they decide what culture integration looks like. For some communities, that's spending a week on the land. For some communities, that's having elders involved in all of their mentorship. For other communities, it's doing a smudge, and that's it. And so their whole philosophy is they lead and we follow. The final piece was program length. So a really strong recommendation was having mentorship programs that are longer versus short term. So the kind of best number was 6 months. Having programs shorter than that can actually cause more risk or harm to Indigenous youth in particular, because they might get really excited, they might start to form relationships, they might get out of their bubble and then the program ends. And so making sure there's like continuity for the program, having some of that long-term touch points can be really helpful and beneficial. Finally, there was a lot of interesting discussion around the role of non-Indigenous mentors. So although it's ideally both the mentees and mentors are Indigenous, it was actually noted by a lot of the participants that a lot of Indigenous folks are over their tax. They are, they want to mentor, but maybe they just don't have capacity, or they're already mentoring so many people. And so I think that was a really big thing that came up, is that non-Indigenous mentors have an important role, but they need to be trained, and they need to make sure they have cultural sensitivity and are trauma informed. One participant talked about an example where an Indigenous woman was being mentored by a non-Indigenous man at the time, and he told her to do less storytelling in her work. And so that kind of, really goes against Indigenous ways of showing up in work, but perhaps that person just didn't know or didn't have that cultural understanding. So if there is going to be non-Indigenous mentors, making sure that there's training is a really key piece. And then finally, there's so many benefits of mentorship programs, both for the mentee and the mentor. So research suggests that Indigenous people who go through mentorship programs have increased like spiritual, mental, physical health. So it also can create more like cultural pride. The piece that I was also surprised to learn is that a lot of mentors talked about how it also helped them understand themselves better as an Indigenous person, being able to connect with other Indigenous folks from across Canada. They got to learn about different cultures. It also creates intergenerational learning. So, potentially having an older person learn from a younger person and vice versa. And it also has been proven to help with things like better outcomes when it comes to education, employment, and then more positive mental health. There's one program called the Outland Youth Employment Program, which is more focused on Indigenous youth, getting them into to jobs after high school. But the interesting thing about that program, I just was chatting with the lady who runs it, is that for a lot of youth who participate in the program, it's the first time. It's quite intense. It's their 6 weeks, and they're in a summer camp. But they're, eating meals 3 times a day. They're building community. They're in a really positive space. And so the impacts of that program actually kind of sets them up for life in a lot of ways. And many of the people who go in that program go into law, or they come back as mentors, which is really cool. There were a few gaps that I'll just kind of really quickly highlight. Some of the gaps include things like funding models was something that came up a lot. You really have to have long-term funding models for a mentorship program to be successful. The other one is your evaluation. So a lot of funders like to see, this outcome came from it, but a lot of the outcomes from mentorship programs are harder to evaluate, like increased sense of cultural resilience or, connection to community. And so making sure evaluations have those markers. The other thing that can be is making sure there's enough mentors for the program. If there's not interest from mentors and mentees, it's really going to stall the program and impact it. Finally, making sure that the program is trauma informed and really aware that you can be working with Indigenous folks who are vulnerable, particularly if there's youth involved. And then the access and participation barriers. So we're all here at a connectivity conversation. If the programming is virtual, it can create barriers in terms of people not being able to participate in online learning or online learning circles. If it's in person, particularly Indigenous youth can face barriers when it comes to like transportation. They might not be able to drive or attend meetings. And then as well, they might have other obligations like family obligations. So just being really mindful of like how accessible is the program? Does it meet the needs of the community? And then finally, just in terms of research, Indigenous mentorship is still in its infancy in kind of the research space. And there's very little research on Indigenous female experiences and even less on Two-Spirit mentoring. And then very little mentorship programs that exist in the broadband and networking space, so the IT space. So this conversation in itself, I think, is probably quite new in the mentorship world. With that, we kind of put forward just a number of kind of recommendations. So the first one is to really center Indigenous worldviews into any program, but really making sure it's based on what your mentees and mentors want. So not prescribing this is what it needs to look like, but really taking that time to understand like what does culture look like for your program. A participant had mentioned a quote, which I thought was brilliant. They run an online mentorship program called the Indigenous Tech Program. And they said balancing inclusivity with practicality is key. And so, you know, if you want to have incorporate culture, perhaps if you're online, like what does that look like and what's actually feasible? And then are you making sure you're practicing those protocols? The second one is prioritizing that long-term relational approach with space for ceremony and goal setting. So making sure Indigenous participants can self-select and potentially refer, even if that's halfway through the program or throughout the program, or even afterwards, being able to say, hey, I think this person should be mentored by this person or vice versa. Making sure that the program is accessible, trauma-informed, and address participants' needs. So this could be things like if the program is online and people don't have access to connectivity, is there other ways that they can communicate? Maybe some of it's like over the phone for a little bit or over emailing at first. Like I think there's just really being creative around what participants need. The other thing that came up quite a bit is having really clear policies and standards that are accessible. If you are working with Indigenous youth, like I mentioned, there can be a level of vulnerability there, or you might have mentors who've never mentored before. So having a really clear understanding of like what's okay and what's not is really important. And then making sure, particularly if the program is looking at Indigenous youth, which I know Phil and his team, that is an important component of it, is making sure you engage youth as partners. So whether that's creating an Indigenous youth advisory circle and having them say, help them like look at the program, design the program, and also evaluate the program can be really important. The Outland Youth Employment Program that I talked about actually has an opportunity for Indigenous youth who are part of that program to come back the second year as mentors. So then you're kind of creating that continuity of saying, hey, what worked for you? Can we change that? And so I think that part is really important, is having a youth who participated in the program being able to provide that really candid feedback. And then finally, this shouldn't come to any surprise as we talked about, but making sure you're really intentionally recruiting your mentors and then also providing them with support. I know I've participated in mentorship programs before, and sometimes I don't really know why I'm there, and there's a lot of assumptions that are kind of made. And so being really clear up front with what you're looking for your mentors, and then if they do need that additional training, that you're providing that and not just assuming that they're coming in with that knowledge, particularly if they're working again with youth, you're at risk of kind of creating a lot of harm if you don't do that. And then finally, we just created a very kind of small frame or short framework for Indigenous Connectivity to Institute, but really spending time to gather intel into determining, you know, is this program going to be nationwide? Is it community specific? Are we focusing on a specific industry? Choosing the format. So is it virtual, hybrid, all those pieces? And then making sure you're determining what kind of mentorship program it is. Is it peer-to-peer? Is it one-on-one? What do you need to have for all those factors? And then looking at establishing a core project team. So this could include things like youth, elders, IT professionals. All those pieces can be really important. And then spend some time visiting with your community that you're planning on doing the mentorship with and seeing, is this actually going to be beneficial? Is this helpful? If we have a year-long mentorship program, is that too long for you? So really making sure you're spending time in that community engagement. And then finally, designing the program based on all of the touch points that you've gathered, and then implementing and revisiting. So I think that revisiting or an evaluation would be another term is really important. So you're constantly modifying it based on the feedback that you're getting. So in closing, this was kind of another quote that came from one of the participants where they talk about youth, and I would say Indigenous people broadly, but I think particularly youth, you know, are really at an eager stage of their life where they want to learn, where they want to grow, and they kind of have those eyes wide open in terms of possibility. And so really having a key mentor can really change kind of the trajectory of their life and what career paths they take on. So mentorship has a really important role for them. But yeah, that's my presentation. If anyone has any questions or wants to talk to me about anything I covered, please let me know. And yeah, really excited to be part of this conversation. And like I said, the report should be public in the next month or two if you want to learn more. Thanks.
Yeah, so you call 1-800-mentorship and you see Sarah. Yeah, I think what Sarah identified in a lot of this stuff is, again, it's funding and, the longevity, that's always a challenge, and it's like, like what Jason said, equitable funding. Yeah, you get less than everybody else or way less, and depends on what color you are, Yeah, but I think that's the real challenge, and now that's what's happening in terms of when we see the economic turnarounds, etc. And this is a restructuring, and this is where it affects a lot of programming. And in this atmosphere, it's really how do you say? It tends to be getting a little volatile, and this is one of the challenges for all of our programs and etc. So we're going to go on here. We have a panel, the Youth Leadership in Policy Advocacy. Are you ready, youth? Are you sure? I can't hear you. I just see smiles and everything. We have the ILPA alumni, the youth scholarship winners, etc., etc. But we're going to get them to introduce themselves. But we got Majedah Hawk. She's going to take control. She's sitting down. She says she's a little shy, etc. But okay, what you do is everyone's got a mic there, or you just you see the button, you turn it on when it turns red or green. Okay, there's no delete button anywhere. Okay, okay, so if you find a delete button, don't press it, please. So here she'll take control. Here she is.
Bonjour, hello. My name is Majedah Hawk. I'm from Rainy River First Nations, and I belong to the Loon Clan. Currently, I reside in Montreal, Quebec, and I'm very passionate about advocating for the issues that faced by Indigenous peoples. I believe in using my voice as a young leader for my community. And I'm very grateful to the ICI for giving me the opportunity to moderate my very first panel, so bear with me. I also look forward to hearing what the youth have to say. So I will start by asking the youth to introduce yourself and where you're from, what made you apply for the youth scholarship with the ICI, and why is this important to you?
Hello? Can it work? All right, there we go. Hi, I'm Colin Obi, and I'm from Pasqua First Nation in Saskatchewan. I lived there since I was 12. I'm also the CTO and co-founder of a company that I'm starting called Nell Pro Inc. And basically, we're a web application. We're software developing a web application. And basically, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm like so nervous. But basically, Nell Pro is a trust-first B2B software company connecting businesses with verified industry-grade professionals across tech and cybersecurity. So we're mainly focused on cybersecurity, and we basically we're on a mission to connect cybersecurity professionals to get professional jobs with clients, high-end clients, and basically what we're going to do, we have a web application, and if you're a cybersecurity professional, like a high-tech programmer, coder, if you're good at any of that stuff, and you're certified, you have to be certified. Everybody on my web page is certified. Everything is good. So what we're escrow backed as well. And so basically, if you're a client, you sign up as a client, you sign up for a client profile, and you post as a gig. So you post a gig that you need. So say you have cybersecurity issues, you have like defensive issues, you need something done, you need UI or front end or back end developed. You would go to the website, you would state that you're from this company, you would post that you need this job done then by then, this like this date, this time, blah, 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 blah. And you would get that, you would post that, and one of my professionals would come and they would apply for that job. And if they're good enough for you, you accept that job. And yeah, and then basically the milestone payment that we go on from then is we go on, so we have a milestone payment. I should apologize. So milestone 1 is submitted by, so it'll go milestone 1, 2, 3, yada, yada. Milestone 1 will be submitted by the professional, and it's the work that you need essentially. And it's the work that you wanted done. And if it's good enough, you can refuse it or you can continue to pay him and you can work on forward and forward. And if it's not good and it's completely terrible, you just don't want it. It's not good. It's not what you, it's not on your Figma design. It's just not what you wanted. You can go and you can contact Nel Pro and you can contact their team of moderators and get your money back because everything's escrow backed. But yeah, but that's why I'm here. I was here to, yeah, showcase my project and yeah, talk about me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whew. Hi, I'm Courtney Comber. I'm the Executive Director of North End Connect in Winnipeg. My family is from Deer Lake, Ontario, but I was born and raised in Winnipeg. My mentor, a lot of you may know, is Joel Templeman, and he has advised me to introduce myself to everyone. So hi, everyone. I'm Courtney. Nice to meet you. I'm here because I'm still learning in my role. I'm very new into it. And what our organization is trying to do is build a community-owned mesh network in North End, Winnipeg, because that's another community that's been kind of left behind. So we have a few different initiatives that we're using to kind of bridge that digital divide. Our biggest ambition is building this network. So we have a few different antennas up in the moment, and we're getting some household access points put up. Sorry, I'm nervous. Whew. Oh, I get it. But no, like
Keep up the good work.
it's a huge opportunity for me to be here because I see a lot of organizations that are doing what we're trying to do and are already well established and structured. So I'm excited to learn and pick everyone's brains and see how I can bring it back to Winnipeg to kind of implement the same things for North End Connect. And yeah, thank you.
Bonjour, my name is Daryl Blackbird, or I'll say my language. Bonjour, Wasinakwa Nadijnakas, Kajanong Nadunjaba, Ajajak Nadotum. That means hello, my name is Daryl. Wasinakwad is my spirit name, which means shining cloud. And I am from Kajanong, which means where the waters divide. And I am a Crane Clan. And I am excited to be here. Hopefully to learn a lot. It's been a whirlwind of information from day one. I have some experience in government, working for CERNAC, Natural Resources Canada, mostly in the clean energy sector. Project delivery for clean energy projects in the north for people that are reliant on diesel. So I am new to the digital sector and equity. So I'm glad to be here and I hope to learn a lot and bring it back to my community to help them in the future. Thank you.
Hello, Singaila, good morning. That means good morning in my language. My name is Jessica Brooks. I'm from Haida Gwaii. I'm Haida. And so I apologize. I showed up a little bit late. I don't know why my alarm didn't go off. Very relatable, am I right? So while I'm not quite nearly as notable and as accomplished as the rest of the people on this here, we don't really have anything quite like this on Haida Gwaii. We're very small. And so I'm very grateful to have this opportunity and bring some excellent knowledge back to my people. I've already learned so much just after day one, and I already feel very inspired, and I have written quite a lot of notes. Not that I have them here with me. So this youth scholarship to attend here, I'm going to be very frank. I didn't even know about this whole event. I heard about it through Jerry Lawson from UBC, who I worked with, and I was the digitization technician on Haida Gwaii. And I heard about this opportunity through him. And just hearing about this summit, it already like ignited this spark in me and a whole lot of inspiration. And so it means an insane amount for me to be here. And yeah, it's important for me to gain as much knowledge so I can bring it back and benefit my community because we're still very small. We only recently just got fiber optics to our island, which has been a little bit of an issue because we're a rural, isolated island. And it was a very common problem for fishing and trolling boats to tear those up from the bottom of the ocean. Rural problems.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to move on to our very first question. What can organizations like the ICI do to help amplify youth voices?
I think organizations can definitely help amplify youth voices by helping connect more to the youth by showcasing what the youth has to offer and basically not expelling. Oh my god, I can't think of the word. Excluding. Thank you. It's not excluding the youth because we can do things that many people think we can't do, of course. And I feel like it's very good to connect with more youth, especially as businesses, because the youth are going to definitely be leading businesses in the future and are going to be, if you like it or not, they will be leading your business. So
Sharing. Yeah. I think having kind of youth panels like this is very helpful. As I'm sitting here all jittery and nervous, I think it's important to kind of put us on the spotlight and kind of force us out of our comfort zones to grow and consider aspects of things that we might not have really thought about before. Like yesterday was an information overload for me, and it's kind of been eye-opening that I have been kind of ignorant and didn't know a lot about policies and governance regarding internet and digital equity and all that. So it's just kind of, we as youth still have a lot to learn, and it's stuff like this that's going to help us get there. So I would say more stuff like this.
Here. So I'm glad that the ICI is offering this. It's a huge opportunity. Indigenous advisory councils are super popular right now. Federal government's doing them. Of course, corporations are doing them now. So I think that organizations can do stuff like this, like developing a mentorship program in-house that you're in control of and you get funding for, and you can really customize, I think, regionally for the needs that youth have there, especially if you have unique challenges specific to your community. And I think that's what you're going to have to tap into, the problems. But there's a lot of potential, I think. And that could be supporting youth-led initiatives, ones that they've put together to address their digital challenges. You know, AI is great, but if they don't understand how to code, they can't read it. So yeah, stuff like this, we're facilitating connections right now. I met a lot of great people. I hope to meet more of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not quite sure how to lead up to that. Everybody said so many amazing, great things. So I think we could just go on to the next question.
So the next question that I have for the youth is, how can we better support and encourage youth to get involved in policy advocacy, and what needs to change, as in what's working and what's not working?
Sorry, can you repeat it?
So how can we better support and encourage youth to get involved in policy advocacy, and what needs to change, as in what's working and what's not working?
Okay, what we could do, what people could do to change, not change policies, but to help advocate youth to be policy leaders is that you could explain that policy is not something that's so like governments. Because people will correspond one ideology that if you're in policy, you're government and corporate, but it doesn't always have to be like that. It can be, you know, it can be cool, I guess, but it's not really. But like, it can be implemented as is that it's something to do other than just not doing anything, honestly. And policy, like, I don't like it's, you could just help, like I said, it more rounds back to my last answer, is that you can just help connect with the youth. Do things like this. Honestly, this would really, like, things like this really, really help out, especially like public speaking. It really, really helps to put youth on the spot, essentially, make them speak. Nobody speaks anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of mirror that and agree. I think it's important to have youth advisory groups and to kind of bring these discussions to the table and get the youth thinking about these things, because a lot of the times we're not thinking about a lot of that. We don't think about the stuff that we're doing online and how it's being saved and stored and shared and sold, not sold. So I think kind of introducing it to the youth, maybe in sort of like a school board kind of curriculum kind of aspect, and introducing it to them kind of at a younger age, that the way they grow up with the idea of this information, and they're not just kind of being dumped into the deep end when they're older and trying to learn and navigate it. When they're older, they're kind of already being, the only word that's coming to mind is not the best word to use, but they're kind of being led into the technical digital world already with that kind of foundational knowledge.
Thank you. So the next question I have for you guys is, if you had the chance to speak directly to policymakers, what would you want them to understand about the digital divide and Indigenous youth?
One thing that policymakers should know about the digital divide is that not a lot of Indigenous communities, especially rural communities, do not have access to like high-end internet, and they can't manage to do a lot of things. Like my reserve specifically, like we used to have like a really very, 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 very slow internet. It's fixed now since Starlink came out, but we used to have very, very slow internet. And it was very, very rough, and not many people could actually do anything, like let alone play games or even actually like just watch YouTube, because it was so slow. And like, sure, we had internet, but like it was practically useless, because like it was just to say that we had internet essentially. But like everything is fixed now because of proper communications. But unfortunately, it needs to be like more specified that not many communities around the world even have internet. And I feel like it should be right to have an internet, especially since it's so vital in today's age, because everything is so connected. Everything is digital, no matter what. Even your car is all just computers. So everything should just be like, there should be more like, what you call it, literacy upon the subject. So.
I'm just going to pass this one along to Daryl, because I admittedly don't have enough knowledge to kind of have an educated opinion on the matter. So I'm kind of here to learn more so that I can speak more in the future on it.
If I were to say anything to the policymakers, I would say that we're living in a world or a society where you kind of have to have internet to fully participate. And it's not about just having internet. It's about being connected to the rest of society, and without that, you're creating economic hardships for Canadians, and you're excluding them, really. It's not just about slow internet, it's about being excluded from education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, getting a job. You can't work in the federal government because there's a mandatory in-office workplace environment. So I would stress that top-down, one-size-fits-all doesn't work. It needs to be customizable. You need to think of community needs and engage with them directly. Otherwise, you're just doing what you want. Furthermore, I think culturally led initiatives, this means providing secure long-term funding, not 4 years, not 5 years. You have these milestones, but you need actual funding, long-term funding that comes from somewhere. Maybe ourselves. Hopefully, if we can get some of those data centers running, we can do that. But I digress.
Thank you so much. So for my follow-up question is, how do you see issues like connectivity, digital equity, and technology access shaping your generation's future?
Like I said, everything in today's world is digital. Everything can either be like hacked, essentially. Everything can be really manipulative and exploited. So a lot of digital stuff can really be really, really good. And I'm completely for digital stuff. So I'm trying to think here. So I think more of like, to be honest, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
When we were practicing and prepping for the questions, I had such a good answer for this one, and I have since blanked on it and forgot what I said earlier. But for me, I kind of see issues like this as just the way that the world is advancing into this digital age, and the fact that there are still communities that are still lacking the technology to access the digital world and navigate it. So I see issues like this kind of being an unfortunate kind of outcome of the way that things have been advancing. And I think that with organizations like everyone that's here trying to work towards kind of bridging those gaps, I see issues like this kind of hopefully not being issues in the future, and that we all kind of come together and get rid of them, really.
Thank you.
I'll speak a little bit further on that too. So how do I see issues like connectivity, digital equity, and technology shaping our future? So without equitable access, we are going to be left behind. We're not going to be able to learn. We're not going to have access to education, careers, economic self-sufficiency, cultural preservation, because we have a lot of paper documents that are going to become obsolete. We should be shifting over to a digital first program for most documents that we have for housing, probably, let's say, our status, and things like that. I heard talk about AI being implemented for preserving certain artifacts, which is cool, digital. But yeah, and ultimately, I'd say self-determination. It's huge. We keep talking about it. And what's it mean to own digital infrastructure? And it's an expression of our sovereignty. I think that will empower us into the future as youth, is knowing what we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to move forward to the next question because we only have 5 minutes left. So my next question for the youth is, how can organizations better engage with youth effectively, and what does that look like to you?
Interacting with youth effectively honestly involves like we're going to round back to like things like this, and really staying on top of new trends and staying updated with current technology, staying updated with what the youth are doing essentially and what they want to do and what they're looking forward to do, instead of implementing what they should be doing and should not be doing, because yeah, things will be doing what they want to do anyways. But yeah, so anyways, I'll skip now.
I, I would say I would circle back to that youth advisory board again, keep the kind of the youth in the conversations with whatever decisions are being made, and then kind of reach out and pick the youth's brains, see what social media platforms they're using, what kind of lingo and language they're using to kind of connect with them better, which is unfortunate because that kind of means like TikToks and stuff like that. And, you know, get on the TikToks and make those little videos to reach them. So just kind of keeping the youth involved to the point where they feel like their voices matter and what they're saying is going to make a difference in the future.
Yeah, I would just add co-designing, making sure that they're involved in actually saying how they're going to learn or how the program is going to serve them, and maybe making the accessible learning accessible. That means for northern communities, it has to be low bandwidth, because if you have LEOs shining basically a flashlight into an area, you're going to have a lot of people accessing that at a given time. So having it low bandwidth option for learning, a platform you would have to create, would be essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's right? Oh,
So what was the question again?
the question was, how can organizations better engage with youth effectively, and what does that look like to you?
Yeah, so a way that organizations can better engage with youth is by, well, one way is, seeking, other Indigenous youth that are kind of already in the field of connectivity, technology, and, getting those people to engage within their own communities, because youth, if they were to see people that are similar to them and listen to their stories of how they were able to get involved, they can feel more inspired because they relate to the other youth that are involved within like these organizations. So me, for instance, I felt a lot more comfortable to be here because I'm around people that are similar to me, other Indigenous youth. It would, to be frank, this would be a lot more intimidating if there was, say this wasn't the Indigenous Connectivity Summit, say it was just a general sort of tech connectivity summit. I would feel a lot more intimidated, but I feel very empowered to be here because, I'm with people that are similar to me, other Indigenous people, and being around them, I feel a lot more comfortable and more empowered to help promote connectivity towards people in my own community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have like 1 minute left, so I was going to ask the audience if they have any questions.
I'll try both. I just wanted to thank you all because I know it's not easy to talk to a room full of people that you may not know yet. So I really applaud your fearlessness. I also wanted to say that CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, has funded this year and last year a Canadian Youth Internet Governance Forum. It's going to be taking place here in Ottawa in November, middle of November. I know some of you have been have had an opportunity to participate in that and before are connected in that, but I just wanted to make sure that you know that's an opportunity that's coming up. It's not Indigenous focused, but there's an Indigenous element to it, and it's a great space for youth to get together and start to learn a little bit more about some of the issues that you're talking about that you can bring back to your own community. So it's another event that's coming up fairly soon. So I just wanted to make sure that you could try to take advantage of that.
Does anybody else have any more questions before we wrap it up for lunch?
Thank you for sharing your stories and what you're doing. As we, young generations are expected to be very, maybe more connected than ever to technology in these times. Since you're engaged, maybe like you do gaming and your phone and like devices and different things. How do you envision as who you are? How do you envision technology to be? How have you dream about technology become something that can actually be of better support for yourselves, for your communities, or for Indigenous communities in general? Have you had any dreams that you want to share? I'm sure you have. So maybe somebody can share that, what that dream looks like.
How about every Indigenous youth has access to a laptop when they turn 12? Something like that.
And just basic access to connectivity, because there's still communities out there that aren't connected at all. So I feel like even though majority of Canada has connection, we still have the other people that are not connected in remote communities. And I feel like that would be great for all of us to advance, and especially since we're on Indigenous land to begin with, and empowering Indigenous youth voices and giving them platforms in whichever organizations that have a platform to get them involved. And yeah, that's how I see it.
Well, I'll just add really quick. No, just before this is where one of the things in youth, it's brutal. They tell it like it is, and they're very nice about it. But I think one of the things they mentioned is that, yeah, the government says that we are connected. We are fully connected, but we're not. And I think you hear it from the communities, and this is why when we started this, mentioned a few things. We are not connected, and this is the inequity. So
that's actually similar to what we're dealing with in the North End in Winnipeg. Is everyone says that there's connection and like the infrastructure is really old and all that. So the community members, they don't have that connectivity that is being said that they do have. They don't have the desktops. They don't have the technology to access. They don't have the knowledge on how to navigate online safely. So I think to circle back to like what an optimal would look like is everyone would have the devices to go online. They would have the information to know how to utilize it safely. They would have that access, maybe removing financial barriers. But what all of that would do is we're giving not just youth, but we're giving the community the opportunity to connect with jobs, to connect with maybe it's virtual medical appointments, go to school, access resources online that they wouldn't otherwise have access to or know about. So for me, it's just kind of providing all of this to people. That's the optimal for me.
For every one of panel members up here as youth, I am, maybe you don't hear it, but I'll say it from myself. I am proud for every one of you, but you're also the voice of your communities. You may be a little nervous, a little shaken, but you spoke from as far as Haida to all north Winnipeg, Walpole, everywhere in between. You bring a voice here, and why you feel that nervousness is that you've taken that responsibility. That's what's giving you the shakes. Is how you're going to say that, how you're going to do that, and how you're going to do that diplomatically. But I think the way you handle it, it's very, very good, and I'm very proud of you, because you're not going to hear that from even your communities or some of your relatives or etc. You don't hear that very often, but you hear it from me. I'm very proud of you, and that you made it up here. And one of the things is going to be a reflection. Mark was mentioning to me, instead of those 3 questions out there that we usually have on the tables, is one of the things you have on there is, as your organizations, what can you do to support Indigenous youth or youth in general for connectivity? That would be one question you see on the table on the tables as we have lunch. All right, peoples, we're back. We're gonna start our panel here. Check out your list, have your dessert, or don't be shy. You still can eat and take pictures just like Jason over there. Hang on. So it's 101. So we're gonna start. We're gonna get the moderator here. He's gonna handle the duties. But these are some of our south of the border relatives, all Anishinaabe and friends and colleagues and allies. It's still Turtle Island, and it's still within our lands, and it's still within the history of our communities. And this is one of the things it's gathering together with everybody, and this is one of the things that we share. And I notice our panel members here, they were a little reluctant to come up. They were waiting for me to come up, or to make sure that I'm up here first and they come up after, because I think they were a little intimidated yesterday that they were going to play some music when they come up or something, so I kind of figured that. So they were looking at me, and I told them I don't have anything queued up yet. But we're going to get our moderator here, and we'll get them to introduce themselves. But this is the topic here, the changing political landscape in the United States. What does it mean for digital equity? But I think in terms of equity, I think we know what's happening on both sides and what's happening in Indigenous communities. And I think it'll be interesting. So take it away.
Does this work?
Oh, yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me here. I've been asked to moderate on very short notice, so bear with me as I work through this. But I'm actually really happy to be having this conversation. In my role at the Internet Society, as I mentioned yesterday, my role is Senior Director for North American Government and Regulatory Affairs. And basically, a big part of my job is working with governments to help them understand the impact of decisions on the internet. And a large part of our work at the Internet Society is making sure that the internet is for everyone, and that we're working to make sure that everyone who wants to have access to the internet has access to the internet, and supporting community-driven solutions is a huge part of that mission. So in my own role this year, there's been a lot of changes to the landscape, both in the work that we do at the Internet Society in Canada and the US. We're a global organization, but my focus has been on Canada and the US. And a lot of things have changed that have had to have us readjust the way that we think about going about our work and supporting folks in this space. I'm just going to be blunt about it. There's been a lot of change in 2020-25, a lot of change and uncertainty, especially in the digital equity space. There's two major elections in Canada and the US, and the US administration has very rapidly introduced a lot of executive orders that have had impact on communities, organizations, and people who have been working in this space for a long time. We at ISOC have seen some of the impacts that new executive orders have had on people who are working in the space, whether it's federal funding cuts to support programs in digital equity, or funding priority changes even from organizations who might feel more restraint to be able to fund programs related to digital equity. And that's having a ripple impact that even at ISOC, I don't think we fully grasp yet, and why I'm so pleased to be talking with these experts today to really have a better understanding of how is the changing political landscape having an impact on people who are working in this space and who are in communities and who have been in this space a long time. And that helps, I think that's going to be valuable for us. I know there's a lot of people based in Canada in the room who might not have an understanding of how these changes have impacted, advocacy in this space. But I think it's really important for everyone to be aware of it, so that we can think about solutions on how do we move forward and still continue momentum in this space. So I'm going to stop talking about myself and invite our experts to start off. Could you kindly introduce yourself, who you are, and tell us about your work in the digital equity space. Iad sé Davida Del Mar bí between Island do Kitlatine buses chin Kiani Dasche do Tolatine Dasanella. Hello everyone. My name is Davida Del Mar. I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation, visiting from Phoenix, Arizona. Very cold right now, but that's okay. I'm trying to get out to the sun after this. So yes, I'm from down in the States, and I used to work, I just actually finished work with two organizations, which is Amrand, a tribally owned organization, insurance risk company out of New Mexico, and then also the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. I have like one foot out the door with them. I have like a contract with them, but my funding ran out. And so unfortunately, that leaves me kind of, looking for a position right now and doing contract work and things like that. Just talking about the political landscape, and maybe I'll talk about this more, but I did have a job lined up with the Digital Equity Act, under Digital Equity Act federal funding, but since that was canceled, that's just kind of the reality we're in right now in terms of like, where does digital equity stand? And in a limbo in terms of even me as an individual who was advocating and trying to look at what digital equity is in Indian country for all nations and sharing perspectives and seeing, the work that's happening right now with tribal ISPs as well as digital navigators in the space too. So here to still support and do that in other ways, but it's kind of tough and like a harsh reality. Also bittersweet to like still be passionate about this field of study and field of work, and yet not have the funding there to like support and like, to propel the and to have momentum around it as well. But other than that, under NDIA, I've done a lot of work under digital navigators, which are folks who do digital skills training and one-on-one training with folks in the community. I also have done, I've run this program called the Indigenous Digital Inclusion Working Group, which is like a collective of people all across Indian country who either are working with a tribe, a part of a tribe, or are interested in working with tribes who are basically trying to solve the digital divide in that space and advocating for better policies, not only for their own government, but for the government overall and in the states as well. So yeah, thank you.
My name is John Perrino, and I'm with the Internet Society. I'm based near Washington, D.C., and I've worked in internet policy roles over about the past decade in and around Washington, D.C. As you might guess, John Perrino, my background, Italian. This is my first ICS, so first and foremost, I'm here to learn, but I'm happy to share a Washington, D.C. perspective. You all know that the dynamics in Washington, D.C. have changed substantially. You know what's at stake when it comes to digital equity, both access and the ability to forward and have reliable connection. And the landscape's very challenging. So I'm happy to try and be a translator as much as that is possible, and look forward to the discussion.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Koch. I'm Mohawk from Akwesasne, New York. I also work for Mohawk Networks. I am in the position as a customer service / digital navigator. And I just wanted to let you guys know that this is my first conference here for ICI. Just kind of give you an idea of what I do. Not only do I work with customers, but I also assist people. I hold digital navigator classes, and I mainly work with senior citizens in the community, and also I do one-on-one classes. If anybody has issues with connecting to devices or anything like that, they can come see me, and that's something that I do on one-on-one basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those wonderful introductions. So diving right into this subject, I would love if everyone on the panel could share their perspectives on how has the landscape for digital equity changed in the U.S. in 2025?
So the landscape has drastically changed. I'll say that. Just case in point, like I was saying, a lot of digital equity practitioners, such as myself, were working towards implementing digital equity plans that the states had drafted and finalized and things like that. And so we're looking towards the next step. And that all changed with the new administration in terms of like where the policies were going and that funding was stopping. And so in that space, I have a lot of colleagues who are out of the job or who are kind of transitioning into contract work, just like me, or finding their space in other fields of study. So with that reality, it's been kind of a gut check in terms of like at least me as a practitioner to like find avenues where we can still feel that our work is relevant, but also knowing the fact that we had plans at the state level, state digital equity plans that were drafted and ready to go, and kind of wondering where those are going to be or where it's going to be propelled to. So it's kind of a weird reality to be in. For tribes, I know that that's also a big unknown as well, because tribes had applied for, under the Digital Equity Act, a competitive grant and a capacity grant. And we're unsure if that is still relevant, just based on the fact that we have sovereign status, that technically we don't fit under the DEI policies. And so we're hoping that that still is going to be, propelled forward. And that might have to do with like, for instance, at NTIA, Ariel Roth was just recently, like just a couple months ago, finalized into her role. And so hopefully with, folks in their place and working in a space just like NTIA, who is administering the Digital Equity Act funding, that'll move forward. So that's my perspective.
At a very high level, there are a couple of different ways of looking at the current situation. So there's the political and cultural context, and then kind of a more traditional political ideology. So what I mean by that is you have a culture war issue here, that the term equity brings a different reaction for one party than it probably does to many people in Indigenous communities. And then you also have an economic way of thinking of this, that it's cuts to government spending, that there's so much waste in government spending, when, again, everyone in this room knows the importance of government investment for connectivity. So those two through lines create this huge challenge for digital equity, because there are these two different political challenges that you face of this. So that's why, for instance, the Digital Equity Act, by essentially a single social media post by the president, was cut almost overnight with spending. This was about a $2.5 billion program, right? Grants were allocated. Communities were going to rely on that money. The future was uncertain, and now that money is taken away. So that uncertainty is a huge challenge. Another related issue, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, BEAD program, there was a lot of uncertainty on what was going to happen with that. This was all from a $60 billion kind of package for connectivity investment that was made in 2021. So with this change in administration, all of these laws were revisited, right? So that's kind of the current environment that we're in, is that two different visions of what equity means, and two visions for what the government's role is. it becomes a very difficult situation or very difficult to kind of think ahead to what you do about that. But that's kind of the ground setting. What I think now is equity has become a dirty word for the party that is in control in Washington, D.C., right? But that doesn't mean that there's not still a focus on connecting everyone or striving towards universal access. So there's, the phrasing matters. There is some opportunity in that connectivity is still a bipartisan issue in the United States. Finding ways to work together to do connectivity in a way that still is community centered. That's a path that I think we're currently charting and is not an easy one, but is an important one. And I do think that there's some reason for optimism despite these very significant challenges.
Okay, so I just want to touch on some changes that I've seen working in my community is back in the States, they had this program called the Affordable Connectivity Program, and people in our community that were signed up had really depended on this program. It was essential for them to have internet. So once this program came to an end, it had the community members kind of like scrambling, like, what can we do? Like all of a sudden they're like not able to afford the internet. So they're like basically struggling. And they still to this day continue to ask, where's this program? Is this program still happening? Is there going to be any other program like it? So it's like I'm on the front end of it, and I'm just having to explain to a lot of the people in the community, what was going on, what happened with this funding. So I just see the change that what's happening within the community, and being not only is it part of where they were excited about having this funding, and then all of a sudden it comes to an end. It was causing people to like get excited about using internet, and they're like, it came to a point where they were accepting it, because there was a part where people were like, nope, I don't need it. But then there's a part where they're saying it's a necessity, right? People need it for jobs, for telehealth. They're realizing they need all of this stuff. So it definitely had a big impact in our community once that program came to an end. So I do definitely see the changes that it's made. I just feel like there needs to be like a little bit more funding for stuff for the internet.
Thank you so much. Those are really important perspectives to think about in this time. From what I'm hearing, we touched on, less funding leading to less people doing advocacy in this space. We are now facing a very polarized political climate that is making it hard to get messages across, and the importance of this work across, depending on who you're talking to, and also the impact on optimism in communities who may have had funding somewhat secured, and maybe it is not an option or an uncertain option going forward. But we also started to touch on some of the opportunities to move forward. And I would like to dive into that a little bit more. Could you, and I'll open this to anyone on the panel that feels comfortable answering, but I would love to know, what are some of the key impacts on this work, both challenges and opportunities you see happening this year on how to move forward, and also beyond this year? Challenges and opportunities. Would anyone like to answer?
So one of the responses that we've seen in general with funding cuts is that civil society has stepped up. Civil society organizations cannot replace federal government spending, but to see a response from civil society of having more grant opportunities, of trying to respond to community needs, looking ahead, I hope and I expect to see more of that. And I think the other way that you might look at this is thinking locally. Continued voices for advocacy and the need for connectivity in communities have been coming from political leaders of both parties at the state and local level. These leaders are the ones who control spending and working with the federal government grants that are still available in their states. So these are local leaders who are advocates for all the different communities in their states. For instance, one of the states that's been most vocal is West Virginia, a very a Republican state in the United States. And they have engaged very closely with federal leaders on how to best support their state. They are advocating right now for things like training programs. Part of the BEAD program was that there should be money that was left aside so that you're not just creating a new connectivity, but you're also training with educational programs, economic opportunities, right? But leaders are looking for ways to cut with spending. So the governor, the senators, and those at the local level are advocating for their communities to keep that money that was meant to be there to provide those opportunities. So I think probably, again, the most helpful way of looking at this is all politics is local. Think local, your local representatives, if you're in the United States, if you work and build those relationships at a local level, those are very influential voices. Your local representatives will know the senators with staying power. They'll have connections to federal agencies, and they are advocating for you, for their communities, for their representatives, and whether that's just for them to get reelected or, hopefully they actually have a passion for their communities. So, I don't see there being additional funding that becomes available in the immediate term from the federal government, given that there are all these federal cuts. But I do think that there is still bipartisan advocacy for connectivity programs overall. One of the other kind of complications here is I think that there's a tendency to oversimplify this issue. We think a lot in the United States about rural connectivity, but rural connectivity is not, the only gap that we're seeing for underserved populations. So political dynamics do incentivize rural connectivity, given different political bases, making sure that there's continued conversation that connectivity is also needed, affordability, like affordable options are needed in also urban environments for those underserved populations is key in working with policymakers at your local level. Whether you are in a rural population or a more urban population is going to be key for that true universal connection and the affordability piece. The affordability piece is, I think, one of the biggest questions along with workforce development right now.
So yeah, some great points have been made in terms of this is everybody's issue. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. And I think that's key in terms of propelling a lot of these initiatives forward in terms of this is going to, affect our elders. It's going to affect people finding jobs online. It's going to affect just different aspects of our community, how we bank online, how we socially connect online. And so I think keeping those sort of factors of we're just everyday people trying to stay connected and thrive within our communities is hopefully something that the decision makers are going to pay attention to in terms of what they're funding and what they're advocating for. And of course, funders too, private funders as well. So hopefully people see the need that's there, because the other thing that gives me hope too is that There's the broadband funding and infrastructure is still there. It's still existing. People are still building networks within the US. And once that infrastructure is built and we have the network, people need to use it and they need to know how to use it online and safely. And so those skills and the different knowledge that is needed, that is under the umbrella of digital equity is going to be relevant. I mean, it's relevant now, but it's going to be especially relevant once we have, we light up the fiber. So I think in that case, if we're looking forward thinking and everything of if we're building the ship, how is it going to get onto the ocean? Basically, it's that sort of next step of thinking generations ahead, thinking how it's going to affect us in the long run, especially how technology changes too. So I think right now people are a little hesitant about AI and how that's going to work and how it's going to change our infrastructure as well. I think we should also just be conscious about how technology in general is going to be changing as the fiber or wireless networks are being built right now. And yeah, again, I just want to emphasize too, it is everybody's problem. So no matter of who you are, where you're from, whether you're tribal, rural, or urban, I think it's going to be definitely impactful to anybody wherever you're from.
Any other thoughts on challenges or opportunities? Okay, so what I'm hearing is there are opportunities. There's challenges for sure, and there are opportunities, whether it's thinking about potentially looking at society organizations who are keen to step up in this space and support, or mapping who else can step up, whether it's politicians or community leaders or organizations, other people who can help create forward movement in this space. And I really liked your point that this is an everybody issue. It is. It impacts everybody, regardless of politics. And there are ways to help remind people of that, that connectivity benefits everyone. So kind of, building on this point, I would love to hear from our panelists, what do you think needs to be done to achieve continuity and progress in the work towards digital equity? Open anyone to speak up first.
So, a little bit about what we already said, I think it can feed into this question in that because this is an everybody issue, I think that telecommunications policy is actually one of the most bipartisan policy issue areas. And I think that there is opportunity still for very productive conversation, again, at the local level and then at the federal level on the importance of continuing these programs, the importance of the workforce development and education component, particularly of the BEAD program, where that funding is now, the states have mostly applied again for this program funding. And then there's a question of, well, how much funding do we reduce here? Keeping these opportunities beyond just actual infrastructure development for community funding. So, I think that is probably one of the key issues in the near term. And having conversations about how we can continue to advocate for community-centered approaches. I don't think any one person in the United States, one tribe, this is not an individual issue. This is something that will require collaboration, especially if you're working local, talking to different communities, understanding where those conversations are going, understanding where there is influence and a strong reception to continue to advocate for connectivity and affordability programs is key. Figuring out what's working in terms of privately or like foundation funded support for community network initiatives, I think is going to be incredibly important. And looking ahead, perhaps in the long term, on affordability, and also maybe explaining, why there's a lot of potential with the low Earth orbit satellites, but making sure that communities and policymakers understand that we need to look very long term in terms of what the most reliable connections are and what connections will be most affordable, and communities will have some control and safety in pricing. I think the affordability issue is one of those with the cuts to the affordability connectivity program. In the aftermath of everyone needing to be online during COVID, we've now kind of put aside these connectivity or these affordability programs, and I think we need to really talk about the importance in our everyday lives of why everyone needs access to apply to a job, to do their school education. It might appear very obvious because it is a part of your daily lives, everyone's daily lives. But I think that we really need to renew those conversations with these affordability initiatives, the funding being in more question and being less available to people right now.
So I think back to my point about state digital equity plans, I mean, those are in place and those are hopefully going to make an impact for how decision making is going to be made at the state level, especially with, BEAD funding still going and everything. So I'm hopeful for that. For tribes, I think there's an opportunity to still include connectivity, broadband, and digital equity within strategic planning, whether that be through a formal digital equity plan or just their overall tribal strategic plan. And that would need, just force more collaboration, as you said, in terms of like how we're talking to folks and sharing stories within our community. I think at the national level too, since I feel like there's a lot of folks who work in silos or are the only person at their tribe working in broadband, and that can be very isolating. And so I think in that sense, talking to other tribes and other folks who are in the space, these networking opportunities like ICES, or down south we have NTTA, or net inclusion, where people are talking to each other, forming working groups and seeing what solutions and barriers that people are what barriers that they're encountering, and also what creative solutions they're coming up with too. Also, what opportunities people are seeking out as well. I think that's been really innovative within our Indigenous Digital Inclusion Working Group, is that people are talking to each other and understanding not only that they're very similar in terms of how they are working with their community, but also that they can benefit from each other's resources. So, for instance, like we've seen tribes open up their own data center and sharing that data center with other tribes too, to combat, offering it to a private company to, store their data, or offering, whether they have like an overflow of wireless equipment that they share it or they sell it to other tribes. I've seen those kind of solutions in the last few years, and I think that's just very smart on their end to kind of be collaborative, and they don't have to do that, but just the fact that they're both Indigenous and that they're both working towards a mission and some values rather than profit driven speaks volumes and helps them connect better. So I think also within that sort of vein is these stories that we hear at the working group level. We try to share those with offices at the federal level, such as USAC or the FCC, to say that like this is the climate that we see in terms of tribes in general. And knowing that and seeing like a general context of where tribes are at, and sharing that with federal offices or national decision makers has been impactful. I mean, we've seen changes within programs such as ACP or Lifeline, where they hear stories from tribes and they implement it, within months of like, okay, we need to fix this problem or we need to troubleshoot this. And that's very helpful to know that people are listening to us and they want to learn more. And so I think speaking to your offices or representatives is going to do, it's
going to take time. Like I said, wasn't overnight, but it's probably going to take months. But at least you said something and somebody knows. And so I think that's probably something that's relevant for both US and Canada or wherever we are in the world, is that you're talking to your representatives, sharing your stories, and knowing that at least someone is aware of these issues and that you're not the only one, that there's other folks within your same status, such as tribal, First Nations, whatever, that are encountering these issues. So, yeah.
To add to that, if anybody knows Davida, she's the one vouching for all of us. No, I just wanted to say I think that we just have more conversations, right? More conversations, let people know, networking at places like this, let everybody know of the issues, and everybody is aware of what's needed. And speaking with like higher ups that will, that have opportunity to hear the stories from people that are coming directly from our community. They're the ones that are impacted here with no funding, right? Like these programs that are coming to an end, we definitely need more funding for these issues that we have.
Thank you. I love this. I'm hearing, how, community connections and support amongst each other are really important, especially in these times, transcending those silos. And I think that that's one of the biggest benefits that I've had the privilege of experiencing being in this space at the Indigenous Connectivity Summit. One of the things I love about this event is, it is an opportunity to share success stories, to do awareness building, and people find creative solutions that lead to actual progress towards their collective goals. And, having attended, I think, 8 now events, like, it's wonderful to see how these connections and just this community as a whole, moves forward year after year. So with that in mind, I would love if anyone has any thoughts on how can we strengthen the Indigenous Connectivity Summit community, both in Canada and the US. Like, how can we strengthen each other to progress towards digital equity? What's needed?
Well, it's probably just similar to what I just said now, talking to each other. I'm so grateful for this space, and I wish we had more US people here, because I looked around and I was like, I don't think anybody here is from the US except for my Mohawk friends. I'd love to see that. And I know that what's happening, and, there is effort to like bring it down to Lummi Nation, or to like have more cross-border, relations in terms of how we're talking to each other and speaking towards each other. So hopefully that happens more, and hopefully people like online can do that a little bit more, because I do see definite similarities between the two. I know I'm still learning what First Nations and what folks are encountering up here, because it's still a learning experience for me. I thought we were all the same, but no, there's like vast differences. But we still need to talk about those things, because I think what I've heard from folks this week too is that the policies in the US have trickled over to Canada, and yeah, it's interesting to see that to know that, because for me as a citizen of the US, I am kind of encountering it every day and see it with my friends or in my community or my city. But to know that it's like kind of affecting countries around us or worldwide is also just an interesting fact to kind of note. But yeah, so I think, yeah.
As someone who kind of feels outside of the community, I think something that's been an incredible experience for me is I don't feel that way at this conference. I feel very welcome and welcomed into the community, and I think that's really important to make sure that people like me can learn about the diversity of perspectives in this room and online, and that the people who are in Washington, D.C. like me can understand that, can have it in the back of their mind when we're doing this work. So just simply things like ICS, calls on Zoom between people in this room and far beyond. I think that can have really, really important implications for how policy is made, who is involved in the policymaking process. So that's a big reason why I'm so appreciative to be here. And I'm talking at you right now, but creating a space where people like me can come into this and learn and educate ourselves, I think is a really, really important piece of this. I think regardless of political party in the United States, I think that telecommunications policy is one of the rare areas where you do see that kind of engagement from people outside of Indigenous communities in the policymaking space, and that there really is a desire to learn and try and build a better path forward. So that's trying to find reason for optimism, and I think there is truly reason for optimism because of who's in this room and for that kind of higher vision of what we're working towards.
Thank you very much. I love those sentiments. I think we have a few minutes left on this panel. So at this point, I would like to invite some questions from the audience or reflections on anything we've talked about during the panel today.
So, how do you think we're going to rebuild trust after losing all these programs and stuff from the government? So, I think that would be one of the biggest challenges in all our communities.
It's a great question. Any thoughts?
Well, I think Brenda brought up a really good point at the very beginning of the example of ACP, where a lot of the practitioners in the field lost a lot of trust within their community once the Affordable Connectivity Program ended. This was a subsidized program where people got $30 to $75 off their internet bill, and that completely ended. So people had to revert back to like, are they going to pay for internet? Are they going to pay for groceries? And so, I think that's like a huge loss in terms of like the trust we've built with a lot of folks, where we were offering different programs such as, in that case, affordable internet, but also one-on-one instruction with folks, where we're talking to folks about how to go online safely and responsibly. So I think that's going to probably change in terms of like if there's no one there to kind of steward that conversation of not only going online safely and responsibly, but also ethically and culturally too. I think that's kind of an issue within tribal nations of terms of like how we put our elders online or our content online, our ceremony, whatever it might be, our songs and our stories. And so I think that trust in terms of the internet is kind of gonna waver in a sense. But I hope people are still looking towards it and talking about it and still educating folks, because it still is a need. I think the other thing too, in terms of digital skills and building that effort in terms of like libraries and career force development programs that are already still doing this work and have been doing it for years, is building it into their curriculum or into their services. And so still having it part of the community anchor institution, like services or menu of programs that they're doing, is going to keep this going and build momentum around it. But yeah, I agree. Like trust is like a huge part of like how the digital equity space has been upheld for these many years. And it took a long time to build that. And so I think that's like a huge part of like where I'm feeling the gut punch and like the bittersweetness of it, because there's a lot of people who are passionate about it, who were ready to kind of propel this field forward, and now are, struggling to kind of keep it uplifted still. So yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on rebuilding trust?
Hi.
Sorry. Really quickly, trust is not built overnight. You all know that. I think this starts with the relationship building. That's going to take time. And having relationships perhaps at the local level with your local policymakers is maybe a place to start. Trust is built with relationships first, but then also with action. So, ultimately, I think you need to see action. And I think that's going to be even more difficult when you had action and then that funding was taken away, right? So there is no easy answer. Starts with talking. My colleague Sharia Lane has a very great report with the Benton Institute about what this type of interaction should look like. And she has a great framework of starting with simply notification for tribal leaders to consultation to full collaboration. So perhaps that is a way of looking forward on how you can actually build trust, is getting to that step where the ideas, the policy is built truly from the bottom up, and it's not a one-way street, and there's follow through.
Thank you.
Hi. I wanted to make a point of sorts. I came here thinking that the digital divide was basically the North and people who lived in cities. I had no idea that Winnipeg, the city itself in the North, the people have as slow internet as we do in Litzel K in the NWT. It's been a real eye-opener for me because now it's not just about technology. To me, before, when I was doing all this, I always thought it was just because we didn't have the technology up there. Now I'm seeing that it's not that. It's like keeping technology and connectivity away from us. It's keeping it from us, and it's been a real eye-opener for me. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. Other questions?
Thank you so much. My question is this: I am an ecosystem builder, and I'm working in other spaces, social impact, in the Latino space because I wear different hats. In the Latino space, the barriers to collaboration tends to be egos. Like certain leaders say, "Oh, I can do better at this, so I'm not really going to collaborate with you because I'm going to protect my baby." Actually, it's being said the word "my baby." And then in the social impact sector, nonprofits, charter organizations, foundations, etc., one of the problems they face is lack of capacity because collaboration takes more time to have more meetings, and it just creates more layers of work. That's kind of one of the challenge for each. I'm wondering if within your space, just thinking about what you're saying, breaking out silos and collaboration within your space or cross-border collaboration, international collaboration, what is like one or two things that like are stand out to be the biggest barriers to collaboration?
Any thoughts on barriers to collaboration? Well, I think connectivity, being online, of course, is an opportunity, which is great. I think what we're missing too is the one-on-one interaction with folks and seeing, because I've learned a lot visiting a lot of places, not only in the US, but in Canada, to like see the realities of what people are encountering. Because, once you're on land and seeing what people are living and, encountering in terms of not only the landscape, like trees or mountains and things like that, but also just the climate that maybe they're encountering too, like maybe they're education is lacking or access to higher education or whatever it might be, maybe access to daycare are all kind of things that we kind of encounter in terms of like things on the fringe that aren't actually part of the problem, but do affect it. So I think learning that is important
And you make a good point in terms of like the capacity of the individual and wearing multiple hats. I think that's something that's always been a struggle in any country, no matter what field you're in, you know? So I think, because we see a lot of people who are the IT guy or considered the IT guy, but are running the broadband network, but also coach, you know, the basketball team, and, you know, are also taking care of relatives, you know, have a multi-generational home, whatever it might be. And I think hearing their stories and understanding the capacity personally and professionally that they are encountering needs to be taken into account with these decision makers too, because there's I don't know, there's different factors that might affect that in terms of like the local economy, or even these policies that are coming down from, you know, top down, that are making it difficult for them to live and to be just everyday people. And I think I see that in the States in terms of, you know, social programs are being cut, and the people who are suffering the most are, you know, people who are with families or who are low income. And so I think, and, you know, can't find jobs and things of that sort. And so I think it's becoming harder. And I think just sharing these stories more is just going to be helpful. I don't have a solution for, you know, capacity, because like I said, I think that's a common problem in Indian country, and then probably up here too. But I think if you're willing to have these community champions, which I think finding community champions within each community is going to be very telling of like the realities of each, what everybody's kind of encountering, and can share those stories and have a reality of, or a good scope of what the problem is and where we can see solutions and barriers. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other reflections? Okay. Any other questions?
Whoa, I hate the way I sound. This is superpower mic here. Is there this can to anyone on the panel there? And I'm wondering, changing political landscapes, right? Like, I think we're kind of avoiding the elephant in the room here a bit, but is there any sense of how best or most effectively an advocate or a tribal citizen or someone in community can communicate with those in power in the administration? Like, is there a line of rhetoric or communication that is effective to advocate on our behalves, on the people's behalves, or a tribe's behalf? Is there any sense of what is an effective way to get the ear? Do we have any understanding of how to effectively engage and make them interested and willing to listen to what's happening in community beyond kind of an ethical appeal or saying we need more funding? Like, is there a specific thing beyond those? I'm just curious. That's a hard question to answer, because I think we're all wondering that.
Great question. Any thoughts?
I don't have a great answer, but I was going to say, there's people who like, who are aunties in this space, you know, who tell me, if you heard no, do it again, like say it again, share your stories over and over and over again, and don't stop. Even when they tell you, I've heard enough, you know, keep going, keep telling people your stories. You know, whoever will listen, or maybe even people who turn a ear, keep, you know, knocking down their doors. It's just interesting to learn that Ottawa is like where Parliament is too. I mean, there's an opportunity here to like, you know, knock on, you know, your representative's doors. I've done that on the Hill in the past, and not sure if it made an impact, but at least we're there, and that feeling of advocacy is powerful, not only to yourself and what you're doing, but the community that you represent too. If they see you, that you are represented on the Hill and people are talking about it, I think that's going to, you know, uplift your communities in that sense. But yeah, I think I've had many aunties in the space and mentors who just like keep going, keep talking, and even when they tell you no, yeah, that's only one no. You have to feel, you know, hear 10 no's before you stop, you know, and not even then even, you know, you're fighting not for yourself, but for your community and for next generation and for the youth that's coming up too. So.
A broader perspective, I think some of the policy priorities that are driving Washington right now are economic competitiveness and national security competitiveness. I thought it was interesting, some of the stories we heard yesterday, there was, that was what was driving some of this investment also in Canada, right? I think the same will be true in the United States. There's the AI competition lens, and very similarly, there's a whole bunch of national security incentives and a desire to improve and be leaders in the business world as well. With that said, I think you need to, if you're an advocate, being true to yourself, your story, and you might be asked to share that frequently. But as long as you're comfortable in your own story and your own unique perspective, I think that's a good place to start. So there's these kind of higher level policy drivers in Washington, D.C. These are the top priorities set by the top leaders. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is just from a personal and community perspective, and what resonates with you will come across as true and powerful, hopefully with the policymakers who you're talking to.
Anyone else?
Oh, is it on? I just want to add that the group that I mentor, they're mainly elders, and they have a really big impact on meetings. So we have like tribal meetings, and it's one of the things that we talk about, and we have conversations about this portable connectivity program that we once had, and they experienced the benefits of it. So it's those people in our community that are able to go to these meetings and express how they feel and how it affected them those are the people that are having these conversations, and like sitting with them, I definitely get them going. They just want to be so passionate about why don't we have this help? Why is it in this day and age when we need internet, and some people, like mainly the elders, they can't always afford that. They're on a fixed income. So it's very crucial, and they're very passionate about asking. That's what it is. I encourage them, take it to the meeting, and then maybe from the meeting, it goes a little bit higher up, so those are the conversations that we're having from the community.
Okay. Well said. Thank you so much to our panelists. This is not an easy conversation to have. And yes, there are a lot of elephants in the room. If anyone wants to dive a little bit deeper, I please encourage you to join us at the ICS Calls to Action talk at the end of the day that is private and not live streamed. And I think we're at time, but I'm going to make time for one more comment.
Well, I wanted to add on, because I made the comment, but I didn't ask the question, because I was really surprised that the fact that people that live in cities have terrible internet because they're poor, right? And that's pretty much it. For us in Canada, it's mostly Indigenous people, probably. I'm wondering if in the States, if it's the same thing, that in the cities, that there are areas and pockets where there are Indigenous people that don't have connectivity as well as other areas, because that's what we're seeing. I'm just realizing that's in Canada now. I'm just wondering if it's the same in the States.
Anyone want to take that question on? I think if I heard correctly, is there connectivity challenges for Indigenous populations within urban areas in the U.S.? Is that right?
Yeah, I think in terms of, yes, there's some digital redlining, and you can look up that issue. It happens within the city. I think there's like a study that in the city of Cleveland where there was digital redlining, meaning that there was like lack of services and low income, predominantly communities of color. I think that problem might have been solved up to now, but it's like a relevant issue that's kind of maybe not talked about as much in other spaces.
And I think that's the same for, I think even it's mentioned before that people built networks around tribal nations or were not partnering with tribes early on in terms of broadband infrastructure. But I think even though, yeah, exactly, like connectivity is within our cities, there's other barriers that prevent folks in terms of like, it's not affordable, as you was talking about before, and people can't afford, reliable, fast internet or to speeds that will actually be helpful to them in terms of, streaming or education or whatever it might be. And then the other thing is access to devices too. So in terms of like having a device that helps you within your everyday life that's appropriate too. So meaning that you might have disability issues, you might need a tablet, but you're giving it a laptop instead, and you're going to have to navigate a mouse, whatever it might be. Or people try to do all of their work on a smartphone, which is only going to take you so far. So I think in terms of access to connectivity, it's a more complex issue rather than just like, internet is available here in the city or wherever you might live. It's a complex problem that encompasses a lot of different things.
Thank you again. I personally don't want to get tackled off the stage, so I'm going to take this opportunity to thank our panelists so much. Brenda, Davida, John, thank you for sharing your perspectives. This is wonderful.
Natalie, there's one thing I'd like to mention. One of the observations here is for this panel group. One of the things I noticed is between Brenda, John, and Davida, there's 3 of them here, but there's like 6 people. There's another personality, and I've seen the government side as well. I've seen you're very careful when you're speaking with words, and I think I understand now. It's sort of like when you were answering the panel or not answering the panel when you're presenting it. It's like we're on some kind of subcommittee where you got to answer, etc. Very careful in the wording. But one of the things I found interesting is. The dirty word is equity, quote unquote. So what I get from knowing American, I know very little, but the enormity of the U.S., like any bureaucracy, is quite large. But when they change an administration, to take out that word equity, they must have used the AI, who used the AI and went out and put the AI, take it all out of, and it's sort of like it's a slash and burn, take it all out. And then now seeing you as you finish here, these are the real Brenda, John, and Davida, the real Anishinaabe part. But then when I see the government part, it's like, wow, it's very careful, very articulate. So thank you very much, Miigwech, Natalie. There's one thing that was brought up here that reminded when our panelists were up here, there's something that was reminded of one of our panel members here, and I think it's, is it John? John Cook? One of the things Jeff Doctor. Jeff, it's Bill C2. And he's going to give us a little quick rundown. And for here, this is a reminder for everybody here. It's sort of like an omnibus bill. And what is C2? It's an act respecting certain measures relating to the security of the border between Canada and USA and respecting other related security measures. That's the title. Okay, but in there, it's an omnibus bill. There's things that are embedded and there's certain sections. I think this is something that Jeff wants to I don't know. He's going to try to be quick. Okay, we'll give him 5 minutes. We'll watch him on the clock. We'll see how fast he does it. Okay. And then we'll continue on the spectrum advocacy. Okay.
So, Scanos Guego, Jeff Doctor, Nigio. So hi, I'm Jeff Doctor. I'm a Cayuga Nation citizen from Six Nations of the Grand River. Yesterday I talked about AI and all that fun stuff on a panel. And today I'll give I'm not going to go into a long kind of like briefing or technical overview of what this particular bill is. Instead, I think I'm going to give you all some homework. So I'm going to ask a whole bunch of fun questions. So first of all, who actually knows anything about Bill C2, the Strong Borders Act? I'm seeing a little bit here. Like y'all have probably heard, okay, a couple of people in the room have put their hands up. Who here's heard about Bill C-5? Can't even remember the actual long title of that one. Building Canada. I don't think they're Build Canada again. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, so I'm in a strange space between Indigenous activism and being a nerd, working in tech, coming to things like this. And I find that right now there's this strange kind of overlap that I see very clearly between a lot of these bills that Canada is forcing through right now. So Bill C-5, that is at the federal level. So this is a Canada-wide legislation that it was like the first thing that Carney did was just basically just did all sorts of shenanigans. I don't understand the Canadian parliamentary system super well. I don't really care. I'm Haudenosaunee. It's not my business. But basically, he rammed through this bill. And that bill is very much about ostensibly making it easier to build things, easier to remove environmental regulations, easier to remove labor regulations, easier to basically make it easier for capital to have more security to invest in major projects. Carney comes from a banking world. He is very much about moving capital from one pile to another to make that pile get bigger. That's what he does. At the same time, this other bill he's also proposing, and Bill C-2 ostensibly is about stronger borders. And of course, as a Haudenosaunee person, like I don't recognize the Canadian border. I don't care about it. Like we exist as Haudenosaunee on both sides of that imaginary line, and we'll move back and forth across whatever colonizer says. Now that said, there's still border guards, and there's still laws that colonizers like to try to enforce. So coming back to where we're at with the internet, grow up with it. They haven't seen the growing pains of what it's like to grow up with the internet for the last 10, 20 years. I don't know how old I am now. There's a lot of risks that come with it because the way the internet works is that as you do stuff, the service providers, the data providers, like basically as you move stuff through the internet, if it's not encrypted, meaning that if it's not basically like locked in a little magical technical box, somebody can see it as it's moving through the internet, or somebody can see it as it's stored. So this begs the question, who is that somebody? So what Canada wants to propose through Bill C-2 is what can often be called like lawful access provisions, meaning that it gives this very broad definition of the Canadian security state, police, spies, CSIS, all these 4 or 3-letter agencies, the ability to basically request data politely from service providers. Well, who's the service provider? Is this your ISP or is this your hairdresser? When asked about it, Canada's like, it's kind of both. And it's like, wait, what? So now police can basically call up your hairdresser and be like, yeah, I need to see everyone who's got their haircut for the last 4 years. And if you don't give me those records, I'm going to fine you. Whoa, that seems intrusive. So this begs a really interesting question about the internet. And there's folks here in this room that are very, working on this problem. What does that mean for the internet when the Canadian governments, under the auspices of quote unquote national security, are introducing vulnerabilities into the internet, when they're reducing the ability to have your data encrypted, moving through, the internet pipes, and then safe where they're stored so that no one can see it. And so what does it mean when we can't necessarily trust that the internet is serving us? And that's just a regular person. That's not necessarily somebody that is resisting the state for whatever reason, which is a talk I just did earlier today. So for Indigenous folks who are already vulnerable under colonization, what does it mean when the thing that is wonderful about the internet, the ability for us to communicate in private in ways that Canada might not necessarily like. What does that mean when that's undermined? What does it mean when things that are pitched to make you safe, but who watches the watchers? Who basically determines, one, what is safe, what is legal, what is appropriate, and two, who watches them? So as Indigenous peoples, obviously, we get real nervous when Canada starts pushing through more ostensibly oppressive laws, especially under the auspices of keeping you safe. They're not necessarily specifying who. So again, I don't have like a long time to get into all the specific details of this very large bill. There's bits about immigration. There's bits about the border, that's what it's called. Like there's all sorts of things like that, but there's two major sections in the theme of this conference, 14 and 15, that I highly recommend checking out. And just reading the actual, like what it says. And it's very intrusive in terms of providing police access to what should be private data, you would assume. The Canadian Constitution, I would assume, would say that's private data, but they're still trying to force it through. And so, yeah, right now there's an open letter from the Global Encryption Alliance that I recommend checking out. And in terms of just like regular digital privacy, I also recommend, especially if you're engaging in any activities that you think the state might not like at some point, you might want to start thinking about your own digital security. And what I mean by that is we can't take for granted the civil liberties that we have right now are always going to be with us. That's pretty obvious in terms of what's happening, you know, just south of the imaginary line, where what was legal one day is no longer legal. But what happens when there's a record of you engaging in a certain activity that one day was legal and the next day is now not legal? What happens when the state that just created that law to make that new activity or that old activity illegal now has a record of it and can access that relatively simply? So knowing that this is recorded and broadcast online, I'm not going to go into too much details about what should be done about this, but just going to give you a bit of a wink and a nod about that. So Nyawa, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, I was looking up really quick, and I think, yeah, it's worthwhile looking at. It's a little bit long, but what he was talking about on C2, it's an omnibus bill, and there's sections in there that put in like that. We are familiar with the omnibus bills that happened under the Harper government. There's a whole bunch of stuff like the Environmental Act and everything was put in there, and nobody had time to read it. This is what they did with the omnibus bills, but there's two sections. The one Jeff was talking about really quickly, it's the timely access to data and info, and part 15, the supporting authorized access to the Information Act. Those are the ones that he was mentioning. Take a look at them. See what you think, and see how it's written, and see how it applies. This is something that he wanted to bring to everybody's attention. Is that aspect? Okay. So Bill C2, C5, we know what it is about lands, etc. So it's just for everybody's information. Be aware of. To keep at the back of your mind, because as you develop some of these, or you're putting up some of this infrastructure and you're also online, these are some of the things that we don't consider, but keep it at the back of your mind and take a look at it. So with this, we're going to go to the next one. We're going to have here, we have Lope. Okay, Trujillo Perdomo, or Perdomo, sorry. Not too far. And we also have Trisha Toso, EU Communications, Jonathan Fleury, Norway House. And also we have Dr. Gordon Gao. You're up for the next panel. So for everyone here in Canada, if you remember like the omnibus bill, how it works. And I looked at those, and this is how they did with the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. They made it as omnibus bill and they slipped it in. It was this big. So you had to leaf through. And what they did is they put them all together, and by the time they didn't discuss them. And then by the time you go look at it, they said it's already been passed. And this is what they mean by the omnibus bill. And this is one of them, C2, has to deal with that. So yes, yesterday I think we had a very familiar face here. We had Gordon. He's waiting to get online. His connectivity is slow after the last discussion about C2. Now he's being monitored. That's fast. Yeah. Once upon a time, I thought systems were fast when the internet. Okay, but I worked at a bank. I worked at a bank as a teller on an Indigenous program, and they told me you're gonna transfer some funds for a different region. You get authorization and stuff, and you're gonna check the account. So I notify get the code, get to the bank. I pushed the button, and I figured it didn't happen. I talked to the supervisor. I says, "This is slow." She goes, "No, it's not. That's how fast." By the time I pushed the button, it already came back, and I thought I missed the screen. So a banking screen moving, that was like, I says like, whoa, you know? And I says, yeah, like my bank, it doesn't happen. I'm waiting. I have time to go feed the dog, wash the dishes, you know, stuff like that. So we're familiar. So those are some of the systems, but the secure systems, and I think the most secure one is anybody that goes to the casino. They know all about you, and they know about you, how you're walking around, standing there and everything, and they're sharing. You go to the next place. We know where he's gone. Let's make him an offer here. Let's get him some free meals, you know, come back. So those are some of the fast systems that we take for granted. But, you know, they're secure. So this is the other one is ourselves is how do we secure those? So are you ready there? Okay, so you know all about the mics, you know how to turn them on, and just look at the buttons, etc. So take it away.
Thank you. Nice to be back here today. Yeah, I'm Gordon Gow. I'm a director for Media and Technology Studies at the University of Alberta. This is as I said yesterday, this is my second time with the Indigenous Connectivity Institute. I was at the Indigenous Spectrum Summit earlier in the year in Nanaimo. I have among my research interests and teaching, I'm actually quite interested in spectrum and how it's been shaped over the years by policy and different positions. So today's panel is on spectrum advocacy. And the question is, are we headed in the right direction? So just to set the stage, it's important to remember that radio spectrum it's an invisible resource that exists everywhere all the time. We don't often pay attention to it until our phones don't have connectivity, and then we become aware of it. But it is very important to connectivity, especially with the technologies we're using today, both in terms of fixed wireless and mobile service. And today, as we'll learn, I think, from Tricia on the panel, also that traditional terrestrial broadcasting uses spectrum, and that remains in rural and remote communities still a very important part of their connectivity. And so what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about some of the challenges. We have a terrific panel. We have Lope here. We have Jonathan at the end, and we have Tricia. I'll let them introduce themselves and make a brief opening statement, and then we'll go through. I have some prompts here, but we'll see how the discussion unfolds and go with, see where the winds blow us. Okay, why don't I begin with you, Lope, to introduce yourself and make a brief opening statement. Thank you.
Okay. I stand with deep respect on the unceded land of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation in Ottawa. My name is Lope Trujillo Perdomo. I am Colombian, but also I'm Canadian recently. I have been working in this field, bridging the digital divide for the last 30 years in my life, always focused on rural and remote communities, Indigenous communities. And for the last 10 years, we have been working, documenting and creating a product with the best practices in Canada for rural connectivity to bring that technologies and regulations and innovations to South America, to do the same and to change the law, to change the framework of regulation, to make easier to connect remote and rural First Nations there. Thank you.
No, it is. Hello? Oh, there. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. I just want to begin by thanking the event organizers. This has been a really amazing conference. My name is Tricia Toso. I'm here representing Alfred Loon from EU Communications Network. He really wanted to be here and sends his regards. I'd also taking this opportunity to represent Scott Forward with the James Bay Cree Communications Society, who they run the regional network up in EU ISHTI. Together, these organizations have built both broadcasting and broadband systems across EU ISHTI in northern Quebec. And so while spectrum access for cellular services has only come into focus in the recent decades, First Nation radio broadcasters have been navigating these license barriers since the 70s and 80s. So really what I want to emphasize today is that spectrum access, whether for radio or mobile, is the backbone of Indigenous language revitalization, community safety, and self-determination.
Bonjour, Anin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jonathan Fleury. I am here with Norway House Cree Nation to speak about some of the stuff that we're doing. Norway House is located about 800 kilometers north of Winnipeg, just on the very edge of Lake Manitoba. It's one of the largest First Nations in Manitoba. It's also one of the most progressive. We just completed our all fiber network. We just built a brand new hospital. And also we are looking at advancing our technology in the spectrum and the wireless world, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I just also too want to acknowledge the elder, our hosts, and our MC as well. And I also just want to give a little shout out. I know my mom is watching, so hi, Mom.
Okay, thank you all. Why don't we begin with the fundamentals and talk a little bit about access? So the question that I'm going to put to you, and why don't we begin with you, Lope? How well is Canada's current spectrum licensing system serving Indigenous and remote communities, and where are the most significant gaps or challenges?
So I can start telling that the work that Canada has been doing is remarkable. Canadians, I learned Canadians used to be very self-critics, too much. Canadians used to say only bad things about Canada, but when you, like me, have been living for a long time in the worst conditions that in Canada used to live, it's shocking for you, because Canada, when we arrived here, Canada was 98% of penetration in fixed internet access in remote and rural regions and places. This is remarkable, being Canada the second largest country in the world. In Colombia, for example, we have 116 indigenous nations with 60 different languages, and we have 95% of unconnected. Only 5% of them have internet access, any kind of internet access. So that's a huge problem. So, but now, because that forum is to talk about spectrum, how we are doing right now about that, I can say that we are going in the wrong direction, because we are putting all the focus in the high frequencies of the spectrum. And when you are talking to create a new infrastructure to connect people that lives in the rural and remote, because there is their land, this is where their identity are, talking about high spectrum, high frequencies is the wrong way. You have to think in the spectrum that document is amazing. I strongly recommend to read it. It's very easy to read. If you think about the spectrum like a drum, the external part of the, I was looking for a drum, but I can't find it. So, but the external part of the drum is the high frequency. And in the center of the drum is the low bands, the low frequency. If you want to have a strong sound, strong resonance, that capable to go across the walls and reach many people in this huge building, you have to hit the drum in the center, right? Because in the center is where the strongest frequency, because the wave is huge and can go across forest and can go across mountains and reach 75 kilometers around from a single one antenna. So when the regulator in Canada and US and everywhere is talking about inclusion or reconciliation and start talking about the high frequency, Indigenous people have to take the control of the conversation, of the negotiation, and put their interest or the focus on the low spectrum. Because that's the key, that's the sweet portion of the spectrum. And the big players know that, and that is because they don't want to share that section of the spectrum. Big players want to hoard all that spectrum, even if they are not using it. So we want to work. We achieved that goal in Colombia last year. After 8 years working, fighting, we changed the framework. We have the law for the people, Indigenous people, can use in a free way that spectrum for their communications and build and own and operate their own networks. So this is because I think that sadly we are going in the wrong direction right now.
Well, here in Canada, we've actually seen some really interesting developments on the telecom side in terms of spectrum. We've seen the ISED introduce a framework for Indigenous priority window. We've also seen the local non-competitive licenses introduced and the use it or use it policies. But there are some gaps and different ways that we can strengthen those tools. One thing that we would, of course, like to see is that the Indigenous priority window eventually include low-band spectrum, like 600 or 700 megahertz, and not just like sort of high-band leftovers. Of course, we want to see the application processes simplified so that they don't demand expensive engineering studies and financial guarantees, as well as providing legal and technical support for communities so they can actually be successful in their applications. In terms of the local non-competitive licenses, we'd like to see that scaled up, and that can allow Indigenous applicants to combine adjacent license areas to cover their traditional territories, as well as reserve reserve portions of new bands, such as a 3.5 gigahertz for local non-competitive licensing allocations. And then, of course, for the use it or lose it, we would like to see it, enforceable with shorter timelines. Some of these licenses are 20 years. So, we don't want to sit around and wait 20 years to see if the incumbent is going to use the spectrum. And if the spectrum is reclaimed, we would like to see it to be prioritized to First Nations operators in that region. It's just a few.
Miigwech, I completely agree with did you read my notes? I'm just kidding. So I completely agree with what my panelists have said, but also some of the progress that we noticed is the attention that the government is paying into this space, literally paying by investing some money into this. Primarily, you need the infrastructure in place in order to utilize the spectrum. So the government, I've seen in two frames, one investing in backhaul. Norway House Cree Nation has entered into a partnership with its neighboring community, Pimichikamak, to create a backhaul company called Kitchissippi, which means Big River. And this is a jointly owned, all Indigenous. We built it ourselves, we designed it ourselves, and we're operating it ourselves. And this is in northern Manitoba. And that could not be done without the investment from the federal government. In addition to that, on the spectrum side, and I see Mr. Saunders and his team is here today, the fact that the Canadian government has developed this team, which in and of itself is very, very helpful and very useful in that regard. And that's some of the progress that's being made. With my colleague here on the use it or lose it, I completely agree with her, because in those proposed areas, they're still underserved. And the reality is that spectrum sits unused in these communities, and while we're not being connected, and the system still favors big carriers because it's costly, it's complex, and it's not really designed for nations, because once we get the spectrum, then what? So that's really where we're at. But
thank you very much. So some themes are starting to emerge, but let's talk about, and we touched on a little bit in that first round, but models. So we've talked about access, and in terms of access, thinking about different frequencies and different frequency bands. Lope and Tricia both mentioned that. And then thinking also about capacity to use spectrum and to apply for it. But so getting into that, what promising models for Indigenous spectrum access, whether that's exclusive licensing, shared access, community allocations, should Canada be looking to adopt more of or expand to increase access for Indigenous communities?
Okay, we think that Canada must expand or have to expand the Indigenous priority window to low band frequencies. We are talking about 500, 900 megahertz. Up to 1 gigahertz is very good. It's very useful, of course, but always needs line of sight. And if you need line of sight, that amazing document says, you will need more capital, more investment to replicate new towers, many towers, and it's unnecessary. It's too much. It's too expensive for Indigenous communities and most for the territories with the low population density of population, right? So that bands 500, 900 megahertz offer unmatched advantage. We are covering right now in Colombia 4 million acres from one single antenna with no line of sight. When we started that process 8 years ago, our regulator, the Ministry of Telecommunications in Colombia, and the ANI, National Agency of Spectrum, react telling that was an unconstitutional use of the spectrum. But right now we have the law, we have the regulation, and we can do the same here in Canada using the TV Wise Space regulation. That is open, but it's not too much useful because was made for a kind of radius. We are talking about very expensive radio with low power that can achieve long distance. Are not useful for rural, but the law is very useful. With a little bit improvement of that law, we can use that law to achieve that coverage and that speeds. We are providing 50 megabits per second real speed with no line of sight and in distance like 75 kilometers around. So I think that this will be maybe do a little small adjustments to the actual regulation to use the 500 megahertz. To go to the 900 megahertz, we have to work stronger, but it's very useful for use IMT frequencies for the where there are nobody providing service. We are ending a pilot in Colombia using IMT 900 megahertz, and it's very useful. The people use their own SIM cards, programmable SIM cards, and can create links, connection with no line of sight from 10 kilometers and 15 kilometers from the BTS. It's very useful for small communities in the jungle in Colombia, in the west coast of Colombia, using IMT frequencies. But right now we can start with 500, changing a little bit the law for TV white spaces.
A couple of things that I can think about is one is perhaps create sort of a dynamic sharing regime where idle spectrum that is licensed by large telcos like Rogers or Bell can be shared with First Nations, of course, with rigorous frameworks in place to make sure there's no interference. We would also really like to see standardized subordination rules. So if we could have like a published model with terms that require national carriers to offer spectrum sharing with fair conditions, because right now they can dictate prices and technical aspects of it as well. And then thinking about in terms of radio, like community or social licenses, that can create a permanent category with nominal fees that allow for linguistic and cultural public safety broadcasting. And then finally, also the potential for micro licensing for temporary sites, so when there is, hunting camps or seasonal or emergency use, that's available as well.
Just to add on to what was already said, it's and from my point of view and our perspective, to answer that question is in threefolds: affordability, enforcement, and transparency. Because access means nothing if it's not affordable. So licensing fees, admin burdens, and they're barriers to nations who want to participate in the Canadian economy. The use it or lose it must be enforced because, again, spectrum sits unused while our communities remain disconnected. And there also needs to be transparency on who holds the spectrum and how it's being used and where are the gaps that remain in terms of that, because nations like ours want to be able to provide this service and actually need this service because we still use our traditional lands for hunting, fishing, trapping, and we need to be connected in that. And it's not just a way of life, but it's also a safety thing for us as well, and then we want to continue on with that for our next generation, for our children and our grandchildren and the next generations to come up. So that's really what we're thinking about and how we want to be able to utilize these technologies.
Thank you for that. I want to pick up on a point here around capacity, and so maybe I'll ask you, Jonathan, just to elaborate a little bit. You mentioned affordability, transparency, the enforcing the use it or lose it. Where are we at in terms of the capacity, technically, legally, financially, to advocate for some of these changes? And where do we need to go in terms of becoming more effective?
Well, that is a really good question because as a nation, when we first started down this road around spectrum, there wasn't a team at the government level where we could turn to and really walk us through, because I don't know if you've ever filled out any government form. It's really complicated, and even with the brightest minds, it's really complicated. And especially if you haven't really participated in this space before, particularly because it's not designed for Indigenous engagement yet. And I say yet because that I'm very hopeful that that's going to change, because what happens, at least in Manitoba, is that in order for a nation to get cell service, we have to pay for the tower, we have to pay for the infrastructure, and then we have to pay for the services. So that's really the deal that the big companies, and I'll call them big three, and I'm not going to name who they are. So it really leaves us out of that space, but we're just like everywhere else. We're coming we're coming for the air. So, but in terms of capacity within our nations and within our people, because we all want cell service. You mentioned we don't have cell service, or when we only care about it when it's gone. So educating our youth, educating even our elders on what this exactly does this mean, because we just don't want the service anymore. We want to be part of the Canadian economy and benefiting off of this, because we're not just consumers, we're also owners of this. And so with that in mind, we're moving towards that, and that's how our model is.
Yeah, well, in EUHT, the Cree have great technical capacity. They have built a fiber optic network that services 14 communities, 9 Cree and 5 Quebecois. And they're also right now unrolling a cellular network. By 2027, they'll have 46 towers that extend service over all the highways, access roads, trap lines, and mining corridors. Currently, they offer cellular services in all the communities. But the issue has been spectrum. In 2019, they participated in the federal auction for 600 megahertz, and they only lasted a few moments before they were priced out. Later, they got access to 800 and 1900 megahertz spectrum through a sub-licensing agreement with Rogers. But there are issues with the subordinate license. I mean, it does, the long-term growth depends on access beyond subordinate licensing. So there's issues around renewal, pricing, technical terms that depend on the parent licensee. So it's difficult to deploy a long life network when you don't have spectrum that you actually control. And on the radio side, the JBCCS has been in operation since 1981. And they do have quite an extensive radio network. But recently they've really come up against a roadblock at the CRTC because they want to relicense as native type B radio. And because there's been a proceeding that has been looking at the renewal of the Native Broadcasting Act, that's sort of been frozen. So they sort of can't access the funding as well as turn up their transmitters to have a wider coverage. So there's issues. They have capacity, but the issues are sort of on the policy side at the moment.
Sorry, I think that maybe the problem for the spectrum equity start because not many people knows about the spectrum. When you talk with IT leaders, leaders in communities, even in companies, even in government, you can note a huge lack about spectrum. Spectrum is a weird thing. Just a very small group of experts can talk about the spectrum like a mystery, it's like a myth about the spectrum. We have to do stronger efforts to teach about communities. I am talking about communities, about ICT leaders into the First Nation communities, because we need that everybody knows what that means and what important is for the project, because you can have a lot of dreams about IoT in your territory, putting sensors in your territory for agricultural, for animals, for weather control. But if you don't know how to provide the connectivity using the spectrum, you don't have the capability to do that. All that dreams stop when the spectrum says stop. First thing that we need is knowledge. We have to provide knowledge to communities. We start that in Colombia in an alliance with universities, have been very useful. And now we are starting here with Concordia University and Alberta University also, and even with the Indigenous Connectivity Institute and First Mile Consortium to do the same here. Because the communities needs to know to have a good skill for negotiate the spectrum, and of course financial support. But we are talking about a small amount of money. We are talking about less than $50 per square kilometer covered. If you calculate that amount of money, is very cheap. You can cover in that using low frequencies. You can cover huge territory with a very small amount of money. But the people, the communities needs support from the government for the CapEx. After the CapEx, after the infrastructure is deployed, they can work to make a sustainable model, to deploy a sustainable model in the time. But the CapEx had to come from somebody, from government or from foundations, private foundation. We are working with industries in Colombia, huge industries. Inter-American Bank of Development, a few years ago, spread the notice that the main risk in the risk matrix for an infrastructure project is the social protest in Latin America. For a road, for a hydroelectric project, or for gas, petroleum companies, they have to avoid the social protest even before they start their project. So now we are working with them, trying to create a commitment with the community, and they are open to invest in infrastructure, in internet, to provide the internet of all that communities around their projects. And we are in charge of develop the market, develop the skills among the community to make it sustainable in the time.
Thank you. I want to follow up a little bit on this. Lope, you said knowledge, and I'm hearing that when we're thinking about advocacy, there's obviously working with policymakers, but getting the community on board and building the capacity and that knowledge. Where do we go? And knowledge building in this area is complex because you have technical knowledge, you have knowledge in terms of the legal and policy advocacy role. Where does that sit in the community now? Does it come from outside the community? And what, in terms of thinking of the next 5 to 10 years, where do we look to build that capacity, that knowledge that will enable these advocacy efforts to make the most on these different fronts? Even beginning with just the technical knowledge needed to put a case together to apply for spectrum. Sorry, Lo. It's probably me. It's not you. It's me. I'm sure it's me. So you mentioned knowledge. I guess my question is, how do we develop that knowledge? Can that knowledge be developed in the community? It seems to me it's a multi-generational task to build this knowledge. We have to work outside. You have to work outside of the community to bring experts in, but you also have to look at building that capacity. And it's legal, it's technical, right? And it's social in the sense that you have to understand how to be a good advocate and what strategies you need to develop.
I can start off here. First and foremost, when you're talking about capacity and that knowledge base is, and I've always advocated this amongst our youth, and hopefully some of our youth, they seem very, very interested in this, but training in engineers, we really need those engineers to come in and provide that, because within Norway House, as big as we are, our population is on reserve is 10,000 people. We have doctors, we have lawyers, but we don't have engineers to do this. So we have to outsource that. How do we outsource that? I mean, how do we bring that back to the community? Well, events such as this, including our youth, having them participate, because I can guarantee you they don't teach spectrum in school.
Except in my course. So
Except in your course, yeah. But you have to pass high school for that. So with that in mind, like just getting them exposed to technology and the intricacies and how it works, and that to be able to provide the services, like for example, applying, doing an application for Spectrum is it's quite complex, and you need that legal framework, you need that engineering, technical background, and that's something that's not necessarily homegrown. That's something that we have to outsource. That's something we have to send our youth out to go and get that education and build that, and then bring it home. And then even when you bring it home, you have to pay them. You got to make sure that there's work for them, because if there's not, then guess what? The big three companies are going to take them. And then we're right back to where we started. So my friends here talked about capital expenses. That's part of the conversation that needs to happen with the government, and really only the government at this point, because they're the regulators, they're the funders, and they're responsible for all of that stuff as well.
So Tricia, I want to just jump in very quickly. You mentioned the James Bay Cree, and it seems to me what I'm hearing is there's actually a lot of capacity with James Bay Cree. Is there coalitions that can be developed between communities where that knowledge can be shared, and where you can build on the knowledge that exists out there and connect others to it?
Yeah, actually, this kind of addresses a little bit the panel I'll be on tomorrow around workforce. Yeah, in EUHT, they've been quite successful in training outside plant, like field technicians. So people who are working on fiber installations, towers, logistics. The challenge has been really for finding personnel for the network operation centers, so that's the engineers and IT specialists that can monitor and manage the backbone. So that's still a really big challenge. Can there be coalitions? Absolutely. I mean, I think that's just a really, I think that, that has a lot of potential for across Canada. Events like this can really bring people together. I think that there's, yeah, a lot of work to be done there. But yeah, it's great to see so many people in the room that are interested in it.
After all this time working on creating change, disruptive change in different communities, we have learned that when the right people in the community have the enough motivation and believe in the dream, they don't need a deep understanding, a technical understanding. For example, me, I'm not engineer, I just an advertiser. And after a while working as a creative director, I decided to change my career, because looking for something more significant, looking for something meaningful, change lives. And I have been a little bit successful. Sorry. We have been creating 3 companies and sold it. We have sold it. So, but I still, without all that deep knowledge, I only have the practical knowledge. I can understand what that means, that we have to looking for and move forward. and bring with me in this journey the right people, of course, from the academy, from the government, everywhere are good people to work with them, open to work with you in this purpose. And I'm sure in every First Nation in Canada, you can find the right people to teach them the basics, the practical knowledge, and to create a movement. I don't know if in Canada it's the same, but in Colombia, Indigenous people are very well organized. If something works in some region, that news spread very, very fast to other Indigenous groups in Colombia. So we are hoping, we are working hard to do the same here, and all of you have the invitation to work with us, join us with ICI to do this. Looking for the right people. All depends of the right people. People with enough motivation, with fire in their hearts.
Great, thank you. So what I'm hearing you say, Lope, is sometimes having a strong champion in the community is really the starting point, because they're the ones that can really bring the effort together and bring in the experts and play that facilitating role in building up the capacity in the community.
I'm not using the word champions, because when you say champions of the community for ICT, many people used to think and the young the young guy that is capable to learn pretty quick about computers and about technology. But sometimes you have to have a group starting with elders. Maybe they never will have the skills to do the technical stuff. But if you find an elder with the fire, that elder will be key for your effort. Just because that elder have the authority, the knowledge, the wisdom, everything to still the fire burning. And that elder can teach you where you can find the young people among the community to create or to find champions, ICT champions. So, but it's a group.
Okay, we're just about at time, but so why don't we wrap up with the future outlook? And we'll start with you, maybe, Tricia, to think about looking ahead 5 to 10 years. What would success look like for you in terms of Indigenous spectrum policy advocacy in Canada?
Well, I guess the first thing is to see all the Cree highways and roads fully covered by mobile service, as well as have the Cree language alive on radio and digital platforms. We would also like to see Indigenous spectrum allocation normalized in Canadian policy. And then also improved resiliency. I think the 2023 wildfires really demonstrated, some of the gaps in some of the networks. So we really want to see resiliency improved. And because that's really about public safety. I think that's it.
Few things for 5 years, very achievable goal. Backbone connection via fiber or LEO satellite or millimeter wave links, but always every community with a point to spread or to take a link to the backbone, because that's where everything starts. Having a point of connection with the backbone. Low band spectrum access, of course, that I'm saying all in my participation today. Grants for CapEx from the government. Cybersecurity tools to protect data sovereignty and cultural integrity, because internet is the main cause for the death of the ancient and ancestral cultures. Epistemicide. We don't want to do that with newborns and internet. We don't want to use internet to kill ancestral cultures. So we think the indigenous people need include in cybersecurity strategies the protection of their culture. Not only about their data, not only about their private information, it's about their culture. This is a key thing about cybersecurity for indigenous people around the world. An empowered young leading ICT with vision and skills that I'm talking about. With a strong knowledge, a strong conscience about the value of their local perspective, their local culture, have a universal value. Most of the young people don't understand properly how important it is to preserve their culture, the language, because they say if we only are thousands speaking the language, what is the goal? What is the meaningful to learn the language? Every day we are losing language in the whole world. When a language dies a culture with the language. So we need the young people in indigenous communities have conscience about that and use the technology to protect and spread that culture, because that culture is a treasure for the whole humanity. And now with internet, we can use that tool to bless the humanity with our local cultures.
I would like to mention that the future in regards to not only just spectrum, but really technology and connectivity, but focused on spectrum, that Indigenous nations are recognized as spectrum rights holders, not just stakeholders. And this goes back to our treaties that were signed, because the treaties, if you study them, they're within the depth of a plow. Anything below and up that is ours, really. So idle spectrum to be reassigned and used by Indigenous operators. And dozens of thriving Indigenous-led networks, like our friends over across the Hudson Bay from us, delivering affordable work services. Norway House is also a gateway community, because on the inland side, on the east side of us, there's about 40,000 people. There's about 10 other Indigenous communities that can piggyback off of our backbone and utilize our networks. So then that's something that I really need to talk to Alfred about and the team at EU about. And because we're out there, also policy frameworks that embed spectrum sovereignty into law, and also to practice that as well. Because success means Indigenous communities are in control over their digital futures and not waiting for the big carriers to come, because I'll be old and retired by the time and still waiting if they come. So I feel that we're moving in the right direction, because that right direction is Indigenous sovereignty, not only over spectrum, but over connectivity and technology. So now it's about turning our policy promises into practice and making sure that communities have the tools that we need in order to participate and not just survive, but thrive in the Canadian economy. And that's really what it's all about. Thank you, Migach.
Thank you. Very well said, Jonathan. I think with that, we'll wrap up the panel. I will, if I can reach over here, Lope, I give a plug for the ICI's Spectrum Explainer series. If you haven't seen this, it's a good starting point to get your head around what spectrum is and why it's so important. And I think each of our panelists did a terrific job today, bringing to us different perspectives and really giving us a sense of the fullness of this area and the kinds of issues that we need to think about going forward. So please join me in thanking our panelists. That's it, folks. Thanks, Dr. Of course.
Okay, we're looking at the picture. There's one picture here that you see. You see a tower, and it's one of the Cree communities. I've been to some of the Cree communities, and I'm not sure, but it could be Mistissini. Because of the James Bay Northern Cree Agreement, they have access, and because of the dollars, they're able to help enforce for some of those services. And you see that tower, very envious of that tower for the community, for a specific area. And arrange, they have cell phone service, their own independent cell service, etc. So this is one of the things that happens. I'll give you another example. Felici, you have, this is Michael. Michael, where are you? He's okay. Felici, can you put up the two pictures? Michael yesterday did a presentation on Wikwemkong about the data center. And I don't know, I just want to show, here's the picture. Here's data sovereignty. This is why it's from his drone that like he mentioned yesterday, but it's also here, you see the crane dropping off, you're using the drone. This is what it looks like. It looks very small, but this is the size of it, but this is a major thing. Michael was saying it gave him goosebumps when they put that there, okay? So do the second one, Felici. Do the second one where everybody's in, if you can find the second one where everybody's in front. Okay, so this is the size of it. So this is one of the containers. This is the where the data is. And we here at Catlow, you see the pictures. These are some of the things that we're looking at, and these are some of the things that are happening. And a lot of things that we don't see, and organizations don't hear, and governments don't see, but this is one of those like data sovereignty. But data sovereignty is that they're able to just control some of that. They will allow access, whatever, but that's their decision. So those are the important things that are crazy. Even some communities, you can get fiber, but you don't have electricity. Or the other way around, you have stuff, you don't have running water, but you have fiber, so this is, the government tells us like, yeah, you're all connected. Not by internet. Or etc. So those are some of the things. There's two ladies here. Can you come up? Come on up. Mark, can you bring their sign?
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much. I don't want to stand in the way of the break, but Mark asked me to say a few words about the session coming up at 3:15. I believe we'll be over in that area. So my name is Christy Buckley, and I serve as the Director of Outreach and Digital Inclusion at ICANN, which stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Numbers are the language that computers speak, and names are the language that humans speak. So I'll be presenting on that shortly. ICANN is essentially like the post office for the internet, if you can think about it that way. And in a few minutes, we'll be, I think, dividing up into different groups. So if you're interested in learning more about the work, we have some upcoming opportunities that I'll speak about, including next year, we'll be opening up what's called the new GTLD program. So you could apply for a top-level domain, think of .org, but we have new ideas, some of which I've heard today, like .mohawk or .algonquin. GTLDs are a way of identifying online, a community, a language, a brand, a geographic area. I'll also talk about opportunities to participate in ICANN's multi-stakeholder model through fellowships and our Next Generation program for youth. So that's a quick sneak preview of what I'll be talking about. Please feel free to join us over there. Thank you. Yes.
We're not letting you, I'm not letting you get off the podium really quick there. You know that .com, she said .mohawk, .montagne or .navajo, etc. Okay? You're going to have to tell everyone here. Now, this is some of the things that we are going to deal with in media, and this is for the youth as well. And this is an area of due diligence. There's also an issue of due diligence in all of this. Like, you hear finance, you hear Lyle, there's due diligence. You got to do diligence in this one, and you got to tell us what happened with, about the, when you had to recall the name.
So there were 1,200 generic top-level domains or GTLDs applied for in the 2012 rounds. This is the last time that ICANN opened up for applications. And some of the names that were applied for had multiple different entities wanting the same name, as you could imagine. And so there are many contention resolution procedures that ICANN has in place to determine who gets the name. Sometimes it goes to auction, like a Spectrum would. Other times we have a community priority evaluation. So if you're representing the Mohawk community, for example, and you have documented evidence of their support and non-objection from other members of the community, you may get priority for that name over others that might be applying for it. So it's much more complicated than I can describe in 30 seconds, but it gives you a sense of some of the opportunities and also the challenges that communities should be aware of as these procedures go forward. So there is .jeep, yeah, which is a brand. There is not a .cherokee yet. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is on. It is. So after the break, we'll have 3 breakout groups. Ottawa is a crazy place this week, so we couldn't get any breakout rooms. So we're going to split the room up. But to know how we need to split the room up, it would be great if we could find out who's going to which workshop. We have 3. We have ICANN with their new GTLD program. And other ICANN related things, including some youth programming. We have a workshop on policy advocacy in Canada with Results Canada, these people here. And then we have another workshop on policy advocacy in the US with John and Natalie. So who wants to go to the Canadian policy advocacy one? We've got a few. Who wants to go to the ICANN new GTLD one? Both the same. And who wants to go to the US policy advocacy one? 2, 3. 3 people. Okay. And who isn't going to a workshop? No shaming anyone. It would just be really helpful if I knew how many people are